Commission on Pensions and Retirement. Please come to order. It's Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025, 5:30 PM. Do we got an echo in here?
We do.
Can you mute your computer or something?
It is.
One moment, please, folks. I think it might be Ms. Diesel's computer. Let's press on. We're in room 123 at the State Capitol. A quorum is present. So the meeting has been called to order. Members, material for today's meetings are in your packet and also on the Commission website.
Yeah, we do, because Representative Hill is joining us by Zoom.
The first item on the agenda is approval of the April 8th, 2025 meeting minutes. Members, that's in your packet. Any discussion to the adoption of the minutes? Senator Westland, would you be comfortable moving the adoption of the minutes?
I would, so moved.
Senator Westland moves that the April 8th, 2025 meeting minutes are adopted. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. The motion prevails and the minutes are adopted. Next item is the LCPR 25M1 approving changes to the actuarial assumptions for MSRS. We're going to have Ms. Wilson provide a summary of this motion. Ms. Wilson.
Thank you, Chair Frentz. Since we have new members, I will briefly provide some background information about actuarial assumptions and also assumption changes. One of the duties of the Commission is to review and approve the actuarial assumptions used by the pension plan actuaries in their annual actuarial valuations. The use of the assumptions allows the actuaries to calculate assets and liabilities into the future, which is information needed by the pension plan boards, members, and legislature to ensure that the plan is sustainable and will be there to pay future benefits. Assumptions can include things like inflation, mortality, payroll growth, and rates of disability, early retirement, normal retirement, and withdrawal. The process for changing assumptions, other than the investment rate of return, starts with the experience study conducted by the plan's actuary, which compares the current assumption to actual experience over a 4-year period. The experience studies result in the actuary being able to fine-tune assumptions to better match the actual experience. The pension plan's board then approves the assumption changes recommended by the plan actuary. However, the assumption changes cannot take effect until they're sent to the Commission. The Commission can approve them for use in the next valuation or not take action, in which case the pension plan can use the new assumptions in the valuation a year later. So getting to the M1 motion, experience studies were completed for a period of July 1, 2019 through June 30th, 2023 for the MS State Patrol, Correctional, and Judges plans, and the PERA Police and Fire and Correctional plans. The boards of MSRS and PERA approved the recommended assumption changes at recent board meetings, and in your meeting materials is a proposed motion, followed by the statute that permits assumptions to be changed. And then attached to the motion page are the letters from the executive directors of MSRS and PERA, and I would just direct you to those letters for the specific assumption changes that are being requested. Thank you, Chair Friends.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. So members, we're talking about a motion for what we would hope would be good governance. Discussion to the motion or the actuarial assumption changes. We do have the Commission Actuary, Mark Schulte, here. If any members want to have Mr. Schulte come forward, we can have testimony. We can simply move it, whatever the LCPR members want to do. The chair will be a yes vote on this. Members, anybody want the testimony? All right, seeing none. Discussion to the motion? All right. With that, I would ask Representative O'Driscoll.
I do have a quick question. What does this do to, do any of these changes affect the percent of fully funded of the various plans that were discussed by Ms. Wilson? Do we know the answer to that question?
Great question, Representative O'Driscoll. Let's go to Ms. Wilson, but again, we have the actuary who I think could provide more detail if we wanted it. Let's start with Ms. Wilson.
Thank you, Chair Friends. Representative O'Driscoll, I would put that to our commission actuary. I think PERA in their letter did kind of talk about the valuation baseline and what that does, but we don't have that information right from MSRS directly in their letter.
Representative, if you're okay, let's have Mr. Schulte come up then.
I was just looking for Mr. Chair.
Mr. Schulte, you stood up. That means you have to testify. Mr. Schulte, if you could please identify yourself, and then if you need Representative O'Driscoll to repeat the question, I think he's asking, does just change the funding status, and anything else you want to add? Thank you.
For the record, Mark Schulte, actuary for the LCPR via Actuarial Solutions. Chair Frentz, yeah, we've completed a preliminary review of the request for the assumption changes, and they do have slight effects on funded status and liabilities for all the plans. They're relatively modest, just changes to mostly the demographic assumptions. Usually when we see bigger changes in the liabilities, if there's a change to an economic assumption like the discount rate or expected rate of return, there's detailed analysis in all the experience studies, but based on our preliminary review, all the assumption recommendations look reasonable to us.
Thanks, Mr. Schulte. Representative O'Driscoll. Mr. Schulte, since you're up there, when we say modest changes, are we talking 0.1% to the funding status, 1%?
I believe most of them are fractions of a percent, but I think the system directors would be more familiar with the specifics.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Schulte. Other questions, LCPR members, either for Mr. Schulte or discussion to the motion? Seeing none, Representative Neto, would you be comfortable making a motion for the approval of motion LCPR 25-M1?
I move LCPR 25-MN1.
Representative Neto, on the motion, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. The motion prevails. Our second motion is LCPR 25M2. Ms. Wilson, can you provide a summary of that as well, please?
Thank you, Chair Friends. Unlike the prior motion, which started with an experience studies conducted by the plan's actuaries, this motion is based on the Public Retirement Plan Portability Assumption Study conducted by the Commission's actuary, VIA Actuarial Solutions. The Portability Assumption Study was completed for the MSRS General, State Patrol, and Correctional plans, the PERA General, Police and Fire and Correctional plans, TRA, and St. Paul teachers. This motion specifically changes the assumptions referred to as load factors, which account for the cost of the portability statutes, specifically the statutes providing for combined service annuities and coverage by more than one plan. And in more plain terms, these statutes describe how members' benefits earned in a Minnesota statewide pension plan can recognize prior pay and service earned in another Minnesota statewide pension plan. Again, the boards of MSRS, PERA, TRA, and St. Paul teachers approved the recommended assumption changes at the recent board meetings. Again, in your meeting materials is the proposed motion, and attached to the motions are the letters from MSRS, PERA, TRA, and St. Paul teachers, and I would direct you to these letters for the specific load factor changes. It shows what the current load factors are and what the changes are suggested to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Well done. Mr. Schulte, if you don't mind, maybe for this one, a minute or two of testimony, just explaining more to the LCPR, things like load factor and what this would mean to pass this. Mr. Schulte.
Okay. Chair Frentz, Ms. Wilson had a good summary. So what we do is we gather data from all the pension systems so we can match up members who have a deferred benefit in one system and are currently working in another system to estimate what the value might be if the pay in one pension system is used to enhance the benefit in another system that they may have had from prior employment. And that's not available to the individual systems because they don't have all the data from all the pension plans. So we review it, come up with an estimate of liability change from that portability law that's in our statutes, and recommend updates to a load that's applied to the liabilities for each of the plans themselves. So it's a standard update. It's been quite a while since those loads were updated, so we saw some pretty large changes, and we testified about that a few weeks ago. but overall, the liability effect is really minor. I think the one change that had a larger effect was on, I believe, PERA Correctional, where it was actually about a 4% decrease in a portion of their liability for the updated loads factors.
Thank you, Mr. Schulte. Members, questions for Mr. Schulte or discussion on the motion? I believe you have the letters of support in your folders as well from the plans. Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The two plans that we have been keeping our eye on have been the PER, PNF, and I see that liability has gone down a little bit. And the other is TRA. Maybe you could speak just a little bit to the TRA page in here, Mr. Schulte, and what we're looking at on here. Again, not only for our benefit, but for the benefit of the public that's here as well, who might not have these documents in hand, just to get a high overview of what we're looking at.
Sure.
Thanks, Representative O'Driscoll. Mr. Schulte, to the TRA material that's contained in the letters in the packet.
Chair Friends, Representative O'Driscoll, you're correct. I don't have the materials directly in front of me, but I recall that the TRA effect of the loads was very minor, may have been the smallest for most of the plans. The loads itself may have changed much, but I believe the liability effect was very small.
Representative O'Driscoll, any follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Schulte, the reason I asked that question is we are showing, a slight change in here, and I think that does affect, in a positive way, the funding of the TRA balance. And I want to talk about that because, again, the last thing that we want is any of our plans to be moving backwards because we haven't identified liabilities correctly on here, and that affects not only the people who are in one plan or another. They're all important jobs that people are doing, and we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing to cover everyone on here. So I wanted to take a few minutes, since we have a large number of new folks who are on the commission, to give them the benefit of an understanding of what a study like this does and how this affects what happens on a go-forward basis. At some point, we'll also do a demographic census review, which will have a bigger impact as to the funding of this. That's non-monetary, but it is about the demographics of the individuals and our anticipated time that we need to pay out and life expectancy. So you're all going to want to come back for that night when we have that conversation, because that is a fun one.
Thanks, Representative O'Driscoll. Members, other questions or comments? All right, seeing none. Senator Seeberger, would you be willing to make the motion to approve LCPR 25-M2?
So moved.
Senator Seeberger, discussion to the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. The motion prevails and the language is adopted. Item number 4, Revisor Document 2505437. This is the Firefighter Relief Association. Members may recall the recipient disclosure issue. We're going to go first to Senator Rasmussen. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the opportunity to take a closer look at this issue. I was able to meet with the state auditor and her team, and I'm satisfied that they are receiving information that is more helpful than what we have in this current disclosure that's required to be sent to the LCPR. And so I, Mr. Chair, would like to move that the revisor number on agenda item number 4 be recommended to be included into the pension omnibus bill.
Senator Rasmussen moves that Revisor Document 2505437 be adopted into the pension omnibus bill. Any discussion? My discussion is thank you, Senator Rasmussen. You raised some good questions, and we were told earlier that you had been satisfied. Thank you for working with the state auditor. Just an example of some stuff that may not seem like a big deal right this minute, but might be a very big deal sometime soon. With that, members, any further discussion to the Rasmussen motion? Seeing none, all in favor of adopting the Rasmussen motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. That language will be incorporated into the 2025 Omnibus Pension Bill. Thanks to everybody who put in time on that. With that, we'll go to item number 5 on the agenda, the MSRS Correctional Plan Eligibility Work Group. Members, we're going to have Ms. Lincheski give a description and introduction to the work group, and some of the materials are in your folders for this. We also have some testifiers, so let's have Ms. Lincheski walk through it first. We'll go to the testifiers, and then we'll talk. Ms. Lincheski.
Thank you, Chair Friends. In your meeting folder, you will find
my memo to the commission that summarizes the work of the work group and the recommended legislation. Also, the work group member list, 2 amendments to the draft bill, and the draft bill, which is numbered LCPR 25-003. These are in draft because they are recommendations of the work group, so they weren't introduced, but hopefully we'll be able to deal with them today. The MSRS Correctional Plan covers state employees who work in the state's correctional system, sex offender program, or forensic services program. State employees in these facilities or programs want to be covered by the correctional plan instead of the general plan because this plan provides a richer benefit at 2.2% of pay, a normal retirement age of 55 versus 66 in the general plan, and a duty disability benefit, among other benefits. Eligibility depends on employment position, which is, as I note in the memo, is unique among the plans. In addition, for all but 8 employment positions, coverage depends on whether the employee spends at least 75% of working time in direct contact with incarcerated persons or patients. The employment positions are actually listed in the statutes, and it's quite a long list. For instance, if an employee is an accounting manager in one of the facilities, the employee does not have the requisite direct contact, and the accounting manager, therefore, that position is not listed in the statute and is covered by the general plan. If an employee is an electrician, for instance, that employment position is going to be hopefully listed in the statute, but the individual also has to demonstrate that they have 75% of their working time in direct contact with incarcerated persons or patients. If they do, then they're covered by the correctional plan. One statute is at issue, Section 352.91. The statute does 2 things. First, it lists all covered employment positions, and for most positions applies this direct contact requirement. And second, the statute provides procedures for adding, deleting, or changing the title of the employment positions. These procedures are not frequently followed, or if they are only followed in part, at least in my experience over the last 10 years. Almost every year, the Commission considers requests, typically from the employee representatives, to add employment positions to the lists in the statute. This has led at times to public disagreement between the agencies, which are the Department of Corrections and the Department of Human Services, now Direct Care and Treatment, on one hand, and the employee representatives who are AFSCME, MAPE, MNA, the Nurses Association, and MMA, on whether an employment position should be added or whether the employee has the requisite direct contact. In 2024, the Commission heard 3 bills attempting to add positions. There was testimony regarding direct contact and whether procedures had been followed. After discussion, the Commission decided to establish a work group that would meet, go through this statute, and update the statute, and hopefully overhaul the procedures. The work group met 5 times during July through August of 2024. Topics included combining the procedures, which now require each agency to have its own standing committee and its own procedures, and to combine that into one set of procedures used by both agencies. Defining direct contact and other terms which are not currently defined in the statute. One big issue was whether corrections agents should be added to the correctional plan. And another big issue was whether this other facility, the Anoka Metro Regional Treatment Center, should be added to the correctional plan. Hopefully a testifier will address that issue later. The work group then produced a bill, which is before you. I'll do a quick section-by-section summary of the bill in just a minute. Because of a lack of consensus between the union representatives and the agency representatives, we produced also 2 amendments. The one amendment adds the Anoka facility, which I mentioned was a point of some contention among the work group members. It would add approximately 1,100 employees and as many as 50 new employment positions to the statute. The 2A amendment deletes several positions from the statute, actually from the bill, that are not currently filled but could be filled in the future. So these are positions that don't have incumbents but at some point could be filled. There was some contention about whether those positions should be removed or retained, so we presented it as an amendment. I want to emphasize that the bill, or at least a portion of it, should become law. Currently, many of the titles of employment positions listed in the statute are no longer correct, and employment positions currently in use are missing from the lists. If an employee's employment position is not listed or the title has changed, the employee is no longer eligible for coverage by the correctional plan unless the agencies go through the procedures and come to the legislature and change the title or add the employment position. These procedures, as I mentioned, have not been consistently followed. Accordingly, it has become apparent that many employees are receiving retirement coverage by the correctional plan, even though their employment position is not listed in the statute. Doing this, the fact that they are still covered, while it's good news for the employee, means that the correctional plan is not being administered in accordance with its terms, which is one of these IRS disqualification issues. So technically, we no longer have a disqualified or a qualified plan. This should be fixed as quickly as we can, especially now that it's been identified. Just moving on to a very brief section by section of the bill. Sections 1 to 3 are non-substantive changes. Section 4 revises the policy statement for the correctional plan to use new terminology. Section 5 adds new definitions, as I mentioned, such as for direct contact. Section 6 consists of the list of employment positions. The first subdivision lists the 8 positions that don't require direct contact. The next 5 subdivisions list employment positions that do require direct contact. Section 7 of the bill revises the procedures for correcting titles and adding or deleting employment positions, or adding or seizing coverage for particular employees. A single new committee is established called the Correctional Plan Membership Committee, which replaces the need for a committee at each agency. The Correctional Plan Membership Committee will be convened by the MSRS Executive Director on a quarterly basis to review adding, deleting, or correcting titles of employment positions. Sections 8 to 10 are technical changes. Section 11 repeals the current statute, 352.91, which is being replaced by, I believe, 4 new statutes. And the effective date is January 1 of 2026. That is my report.
Thank you, Ms. Linczewski. So members, here's what we got. We have to get in conformity with the IRS if we want to receive the preferential tax treatment for this. So this bill's got to pass. There are 2 amendments, which I don't know how much members have had a chance to talk to. The chair proposes we take our testimony, we discuss the amendments one at a time, and we pass whatever we come up with, the underlying bill and any amendments that LCPR members want to adopt. Let's have some discussion first, and then we have some testifiers. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question, whose bill is this? Which legislator has authored a bill and introduced it?
I do not have an author's introduced. We're planning to adopt it right onto the pension bill, Senator Rasmussen. The work group makes recommendations to LCPR, and the recommendations can be adopted.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I mean, if I'm looking at the correct bill here, it's, this draft language, it's a 17-page bill. And I would encourage the work group to go find a legislator and to introduce a bill. And I think it's important for a number of reasons. One is to have bill introductions come through the process, that the public is aware of what's going on, and if there's an issue, they can go talk to that legislator. I also think it's important to just have a legislator involved in looking through and understanding what the bill is and does, and can go work with stakeholders. And I think this session in particular, and this is my 5th year on the Pension Commission, we've had a lot of draft legislation come forward, and I think that's okay as an exception. But here, this is a 17-page bill, and we don't have a legislator who can come and talk about, what the merits are of this bill. And I understand we might have some time constraints, and but the revisor's office can produce jackets pretty quick if we need it. And I just think that's an important thing for public transparency as a part of this commission.
Senator Rasmussen, once again, you are a true servant of the process, and I agree with you to a point. We do have some timing issues with this. We have the Internal Revenue Service. We have the report now, and it is preferable to have a legislator offer it, but not required. So what we're doing here is the chair is putting this bill before the LCPR and seeing if we can get enough support. If a member decides that they can't support it because it's not brought forward by a legislator, That is their prerogative. I think what we'll see here is that some of this needs to be passed. And Senator Rasmussen, as you know, what we do at LCPR is make a recommendation to each of the House and Senate state government committees. And so it's not the last opportunity to have it brought forward. With that, I propose we put the testimony on, ask questions, and every member of LCPR can indicate whether they're able to support it or whether they want it to follow a little bit different process. Good enough? All right, thanks, Senator Rasmussen. With that, members, we have testifiers listed in your packet. We'll start with Aaron Leonard, and then on deck would be Nick Stevens. Ms. Leonard, if you could come forward, please. Ms. Leonard, welcome back to LCPR. I see that I just skipped over a part of my notes, so just indulge me here. I wanted to thank the members of the work group. I wanted to thank the people who put time in, and thank the previous LCPR chair, Chair Herr, who was fundamental to make that, not because she's leaving, but because she did a great job. And just say, you know, we put these work groups together for important reasons. It's not always glamorous, but thank you to everybody who served on it. Thanks for the report. With that, Ms. Leonard, nice seeing you again. If you could introduce yourself and present your testimony, please.
Good evening, Chair Frentz and members of the LCPR. My name is Aaron Leonard. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota State Retirement System. As part of the legislation, I was a member of the working group, as well as some MSRS staff people were included as well. So thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on the results from the Correctional Plan Working Group. The proposed legislation in LCPR 25-003 includes additions and modifications to MSRS statutes that were agreed upon by all work group members. Ms. Linczewski did a great job summarizing, so I'll try to be brief. I think it's important to note that the current membership in the plan remains the same, the way that this current proposal is written, and does not result in additional costs for members or employers. The specific job classifications of employees were reviewed in detail and updated to match their current classification titles. Additionally, they were arranged differently in statute to provide clarity, improve readability, and will be easier to maintain if amendments are needed. So if we need to make changes, add folks, remove them, it'll be a lot easier the way that it is drafted in this legislation. The 75% direct contact requirement remains in place, and that was an important thing for us because of the potential additional costs if that were lifted and all employees were included. And the proposed legislation includes definitions to clarify what direct contact means. We didn't have good definitions in the current statute as it is. And then finally, there were no benefit modifications to provisions of the correctional plan. So I think that's just important to note because we've been talking about so many benefit modifications this year. I think the most significant update is the proposed process for adding, removing, changing positions. As Ms. Linczewski noted, MSRS will be responsible for that going forward. Having a centralized location, meeting on a quarterly basis as required by statute will provide consistency when working with different agencies, and hopefully it will result in a better experience for the employees and the employers. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Ms. Leonard. There may be some questions, but next, let's go to Nick Stevens. Mr. Stevens, welcome to the Pension Commission. If you could please introduce yourself and give some testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Nicholas Stevens. I'm an LPN at AMRTC. I was also an LPN at the CBHH in Annandale and with the correctional facility in St. Cloud. I've worked as a security counselor at AMRTC for about 1.5 years as well. I'm a member of the AFSCME Local 1307 and Council 5. I thank you all for hearing my testimony today. I'm here to support the A1 amendment before you today and ask that you incorporate it into the bill and include it into your omnibus pension bill. Workers at AMRTC deserve the early retirement benefit, both as a recognition of their service we provide to some of the most challenging patients in the state, but also for the safety and welfare of the staff and patients inside the facility. AMRTC is the largest psychiatric hospital in the state of Minnesota, and our charge is to stabilize and treat individuals dealing with incredibly complex mental health diagnoses. With many of these individuals exhibiting behaviors that are dangerous to themselves, to others, and other patients and staff. Our patients, many of which come from jails, are erratic and unpredictable due to the fact that they're not on medications that they need or are unhappy about their current situation that they, as I've heard from the patients myself, come here because it's better than jail, here being AMRTC. This attitude often leads the most dangerous to our doorstep, and when they don't get what they want, they tend to lash out and become more aggressive, and a lot of times end up back in custody to maintain the safety of our facility and patients and staff. As an LPN, 13 plus years, and a security counselor for about the last year and a half, I've experienced the dangers of having staff that are no longer physically capable of protecting themselves or others firsthand. At this time, we have 17 staff injuries this year so far. Last year at this time, we had 13, and a total of 64 injuries in 2024. This amounts to about 1 injury a week on average, and shows that the job we do here at AMRTC is not an older man's game. We need to be given the chance to retire at an age that we can still enjoy the retirement we have coming to us, hopefully before an injury takes us out first. This is why it's time to include AMRTC workers in the correctional plan, and I ask for your support of the A1 amendment. Thank you much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stevens. Senator Rasmussen, you wanted to be recognized, and I wonder if it had to do with the fact that this testimony was to the 1A as opposed to the underlying bill.
And Mr. Chair, it can wait, but I just wondered if there is a legislator who drafted those amendments or requested that they be drafted.
No, and members, here's what's happened on the 2 amendments. So the work group got together, did great work, and agreed on a bunch of things. Those things are in the underlying bill, and I would present them to you as relatively non-controversial. The 2 amendments drafted by LCPR staff represent the 2 items where the work group was really not able to come to a consensus. And so what our plan is to hear the entire bill, hear the 2 amendments, and let the chips fall where they may. Your concern about amendments that are not drafted by a legislator is noted, Senator Rasmussen.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to continue with, I don't know if there's more testifiers, but.
I just happen to have some more testifiers right here, Senator.
Okay.
I-
You
in
can
fact,
continue with testifiers, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Senator. Next, we'll have Devin Bruce testify, and then on deck would be Ben Balio. Mr. Bruce. Mr. Bruce, nice to see you again. Please introduce yourself and present your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good to see you again as well. For the record, my name is Devin Bruce. I'm the Director of Legislative and Political Affairs for the Minnesota Association of Professional Employees, MAPE. We represent over 19,000 state professionals across all agencies, board, and commission, including many job classifications in the rehabilitative, educational, and therapeutic staff at both DOC and DHS, which are included in the CERP plan. I want to first thank folks for their willingness and the opportunity to collaborate and discuss many of these changes to the CERP statute, which aren't necessarily substantial or substantive in their effect. However, while we certainly didn't get everything, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, for MAPE, this was an important improvement for the process, particularly on the appeals process. It provides a clearer standard and more predictable review process by which our employees can have their positions considered for inclusion under CERP. And second, it also provided us an opportunity and space to bring forward some of the other positions and sectors that had been left out of coverage by our argument, arbitrary reasons, including corrections agents and employees at the Anoka Metro Regional Treatment Center. Years ago, decisions were made to not follow nearly all other states in providing correction agents inclusion in early retirement programs, and like numerous of the other public safety positions. Similarly, employees at AMRTC were specifically excluded from coverage, while the state's, which AMRTC is the state's only psychiatric hospital, while DHS employees at both the Minnesota Sex Offender Program and the Forensic Program were included, despite facing similar, if not higher levels of risk to their personal safety. While we had unanimous agreement that corrections agents for early retirement should be handled in a different plan, as you will hear later today. In the proposal for 60 and 35, which we highly suggest you support. But we also ask this committee to support the 1A amendment. This will include some of the AMRTC folks to finally get some of the benefits they deserve. They've been asking for years and have been denied just on the basis of cost or some arbitrary argument that they are a psychiatric hospital and therefore not a treatment facility like the others. And we are also asking that you do not support the 2A amendment, which would remove certain job classes from use. As we know, we've seen in many, and what was the impetus of this review process is it takes a long time to add additional job classes. And if we remove them now and they're used later, we'll have to come back and ask for them to be included. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce. Nice work. Mr. Balio, welcome to LCPR. If you could please introduce yourself and present your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commission members. My name is Ben Balio, and I'd like to thank you for allowing me to testify today on behalf of the Minnesota Nurses Association. We represent more than 22,000 registered nurses working to deliver direct patient care to Minnesotans across the state, including over 100 registered nurses who work at the state-owned Anoka Metro Regional Treatment Center, or AMRTC. I am Mr. Chair, testifying on that amendment most directly. The patient population at AMRTC that our nurses there work with directly is often hardly distinguishable from those in state-owned correctional facilities or from other incarcerated individuals. Most of the patients that our members serve at AMRTC have been committed by a court due to mental illness, and quite often those same patients will be transferred to a correctional setting after receiving treatment at AMRTC. At one point, there may have been greater distinction between the work and the patient populations when we're looking at state correctional facilities versus a state mental health facility, but the fact of the matter is that between the failings of our criminal justice system and the failures of our society to prop up and fund an actual mental health system, AMRTC effectively functions very similar to a correctional facility and serves very similar populations. This means that the working conditions and daily work hazards are more than comparable when looking at what workers deal with every day at AMRTC and comparing what workers do in DOC-owned facilities. Nurses who have themselves worked in both settings can even speak to the amount of comparable experiences they've had between working in both settings. I think one of the biggest differences, though, currently, unlike DOC workers, is that workers at AMRTC are currently excluded from the MSRS corrections plan, meaning they aren't given the same rights and benefits as their counterparts who are performing the same types of work under very similar conditions, simply because the facility they work in isn't operated by DOC. We'd like to remind this commission that public sector nurses not only have fewer rights than private sector nurses, but public sector nurses also get paid less and have fewer benefits than most private sector nurses working in hospitals or other similar settings. Other than finding ways somehow to increase salaries for public sector workers to remain competitive with the private sector, which we know is a difficult thing for this legislature to do right now, one of the few things that the state can proactively do is provide public sector workers with the benefits necessary to recruit and retain workers who would otherwise be making more money and often with more benefits if they worked in jobs outside of government-run facilities. I also just want to point out that our nurses at AMRTC are experiencing short staffing during every shift, which is not only a detriment to the patients and their treatment, but frankly, it puts those workers at greater risks to violence and other harms given the patient population they're serving. Chronic understaffing at AMRTC, and one way to address chronic understaffing at AMRTC is to get more nurses in the door, right? And if we can provide those benefits, it's going to become a recruitment mechanism. And so we are appreciative of the legislature last session creating this task force to dive into the topic. It's been very frustrating to see state agencies so adamant about cutting out workers at AMRTC and the short-sightedness of this approach when it comes to recruitment and retention at workers there in the long term. So I do hope that someone from DTC comes up here and can speak to why they think AMRTC nurses should be excluded from the corrections plan. And then lastly, I'd just like to speak to the fact that the agencies have removed unused job classes in the 2A amendment, and M&A also is opposed to this. And so with that, Mr. Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Thank you, Commission members.
Thank you, Mr. Balio. Last testifier listed is Dan Storkamp from Department of Direct Care and Treatment. Mr. Storkamp, welcome to the Legislative Commission on Pensions and Retirement. If you could please introduce yourself and present your testimony.
Chair and members, thank you for the opportunity. For the record, I'm Dan Storkamp, Director of Operations Services for Direct Care and Treatment. We'd like to acknowledge the hard work that this group has actually gone through this past year with all the different meetings. And it's always tough when you talk about consistency across not just programs within an agency, but across agencies as well. We want to thank you for including DCT in this process and working collaboratively with our partners as we kind of move forward. There's a lot of different opinions and discussions that need to occur with that. The A1 amendment, actually as described, provides for additional classifications being added, as well as an entire facility of 1,100 additional staff moving into that process. And at this time, DCT is still evaluating the proposal that is coming forward here. And I know this group understands the short-term and long-term impacts with adding a couple classifications or adding an entire facility in that process. We'd be happy to provide additional fiscal impacts of that if this group is interested. And we're looking forward to future conversations as we move forward. For us, this is not the end of discussion, but it's the beginning conversation. Direct Care and Treatment is going to be a separate agency July 1, and as such, we're looking forward to working with this committee as well as our union partners on options looking into the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Storkamp. Members, that's the end of our list of testifiers. With that, we're going to go to member questions, concerns, and let's do this if we can. The 1A amendment has not been offered yet, so if there are questions or concerns to the underlying bill, that's the part we're hoping the IRS will say we did a good job on. Let's go to that first, and then we'll take the amendments. And I'll just flag for you, members, we're going to have to vote on these two amendments and let the chips fall where they may. With that, comments, questions, or concerns to the underlying bill, Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I think the testimony just underscores why this needs a bill author. We have something that has controversy, that we have people who have disagreeing points of view, and this is what a bill author does, is they go talk to stakeholders, they introduce a bill, they sit over there and they say, this is why my bill's a good idea, you should support it, here's why these amendments are good or bad, and I've been working with the stakeholders. And I worry, Mr. Chair, I think draft language is okay. I think sometimes we use that too loosely as well. But I think here's a very unique circumstance where we have a big bill with some controversy, some testifiers, some amendments that are drafted and in our packets, but there's no bill author who is taking responsibility for this work. And I just think that's an important minimum bar to be met before coming to the Pension Commission. And I worry that if we even let this bill be debated and voted on today, that other groups will look at this example and say, well, maybe I can just bring a bill to the commission without going to a legislator. And we have some more meetings, Mr. Chair. I would request that we lay this over, ask the work group to find a bill author and to come back with some recommendations on how to adjudicate some of these conflicts we've heard about today.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. We're going to go to Senator Howe next, but to your point, Senator Rasmussen, work groups at LCPR typically do not have a legislative author. I think your point is well taken. That would be another voice at the table. I think here with the questions about the Internal Revenue Service and the question of the plan itself and how it affects these 1,100 members, not to mention the other members of the plan, I think we want to take action. And I would just take a little bit of exception. The underlying bill and the work group recommendations draft with no author, I admit. I don't know that that part's controversial. I am presenting to you as LCPR members, the 1A and the 2A need some thought and could be called controversial. With that, thank you, Senator Rasmussen. We're going to go to Senator Howe.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I tend to agree with my colleague, Senator Rasmussen, but the other piece is we got 17-page bill tonight. I didn't get an opportunity, because of my other responsibilities, I didn't get a chance to pre-read this, nor the amendments. I think it would be great to be able to absorb this, maybe have some conversations with the stakeholders, understand this stuff before I'm forced to vote on something that I'm not quite ready. You know, it's great to have the testimony, but I would like to actually be able to understand what I'm looking at, rather than, to me, making a decision tonight on a bill that I don't think I'm ready to do that with.
Thank you, Senator Howe. Senator Nelson, and then we'll go to Senator Pappas after Senator Nelson. Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I definitely support the work of the of the Pensions Working Group, and I'm certainly supportive of the draft, that non-controversial draft. I would like to see that move tonight, but I am very cautious about these additional amendments, and particularly, I just, it's like, I'm not quite sure why we would not do the reorganization, get that done, let things, and come back next year and look at these other amendments with really the due diligence that they deserve. We all know here, there's nothing easy about pensions. And one little mistake or one little thing that might not be caught or might have some unintended consequences, it might be a very little thing, but it could have huge, huge effects. So out of prudence, I would suggest that we move the bill, but I would be very uncomfortable moving either of the amendments tonight.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do support the underlying bill, but I'm concerned about not having the fiscal information that we should have before us with Amendment 1, and I'm not sure about the other amendment as well, if that has a fiscal implication. We'd have to look at that more, but I'm concerned with the impact on the correctional plan, the impact on the employers. Generally, we have all that information before us.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, an observation on a couple of things tonight. We have been seeing a lot more revisor numbers and you know, the draft language as Senator Rasmussen had said. And that is not a reflection on staff. That's just a reflection on the environment that we have found ourselves in this year. And the commission was created for the purpose of doing the work that the legislature itself can't do on a committee-by-committee basis with two different chambers, and to try to bring an equal number of senators together with an equal number of House members to get together this year at 5:30 on a Tuesday night to go through and to vet these things out. And I understand the frustration. The question I have is, let me step back. I understand why we need to do this type of bill in order for our plans to be able to stay compliant with IRS regulation, because the funds that are in these pension plans, if we don't follow and update our state statutes and our procedures, that we run a risk of having those be taxable, and we don't want that to happen because they're being held for the benefit of employees who are in a public position here in the state of Minnesota at various different levels of government. So, Mr. Chair, my first question is, what is our deadline to be in compliance so we don't have the unintended consequences that this particular draft legislation is looking to avoid?
Thank you, Representative O'Driscoll. Not being a tax attorney, here's my best understanding. We are already out of compliance by our best evaluation. So the underlying bill seeks to put us back into compliance with at least the argument that the LCPR's recommended these changes. I don't know that there's a deadline by which we can hear from the IRS, June 1st, September 1st, whatever it is. So I'm happy to have Ms. Lincheski offer any insight on that. But long story short, we feel that we're out of compliance the way it sits now. Therefore, the work group recommendations are presented as different than a traditional work group without any federal tax implications. Ms. Lincheski, you want to, any comment? She said, no, I think you hit it. Representative O'Driscoll.
You a CPA now?
No. All right, members, we're going to talk about the amendments first, but further commentary to the underlying bill, noting the concerns. All right, with that, we have the 1A amendment. This is the Anoka facility proposal. It does not have a cost estimate. Questions, comments, or concerns to the 1A amendment? And I guess I would be looking for someone who wants to make that motion. Representative O'Driscoll.
I do want to comment on it. I don't know that I necessarily want to make the motion, but I do have a desire to learn some more background on this from one or more of the members of the working group.
Do we have a member of the working group who wants to come back up and ask some, answer some questions for Representative O'Driscoll? Anybody in particular, Representative?
Let me just state the question, and maybe that will help someone in the audience to self-present on the testifying table. So I've got my question is, why was the Anoka Metro Regional Treatment Center considered something that they couldn't come to an agreement on? And now we are asked to weigh in on it, who are not part of the working group, not part of the background, not part of the discussions, and basically have an amendment that strikes a lot of language and puts a lot of numbers in, and legislators kind of know what's going on, but there's a story behind why Anoka was brought forward. There's some discussion on that, and there was a decision why a decision couldn't be made. And before I vote on it, would like to know a lot more about the background on that.
Thank you, Representative. So that's the question. Any talented, hardworking members of the work group who want to step up and tackle that? Mr. Bruce, thank you for stepping up. Do you need Representative O'Driscoll to repeat the question?
No, I think I can answer at least part of it. To your question, Mr. Chair and Representative O'Driscoll, the reason why AMRTC was brought forward is it's one of the only facilities that has been left out and excluded by statute. If you read the underlying statute for 356, I can't recite off the top of my head. For the SERP statute, it names specific facilities, particularly for DHS, that qualify. And they name the forensics program for DHS, which is the Security Hospital in St. Peter, as well as the Minnesota Sex Offender Program, which has 2 or 3 sites scattered across the state. It also names Cambridge in the statute, which we know is no longer in operation. However, currently AMRTC, which is the state's only psychiatric hospital, serves very similar clientele. The jobs that the employees are doing there are substantially similar to what they are performing in DOC facilities, as well as the direct care and treatment facilities, and they have been excluded. And it is by statute and reference only that they have been so.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce. Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce. Mr. Chair, Mr. Bruce, that's very helpful. Follow-up question. You may or may not know the answer to the question. What was differentiating the Anoka facility from all the others that were named in statute when you said it was the only outlier? Is there any history or background on there? If maybe not Mr. Bruce, someone else present in the audience today that can help us. And again, this is to Senator Rasmussen's point, why it's very helpful to have a bill author, because they would have asked these questions of people, and we wouldn't have to be playing share the bill author tonight at the dais tonight.
Thanks, Representative O'Driscoll. Mr. Bruce, or perhaps Mr. Storkamp. Mr. Bruce, if you want to try to respond, you can, and then we'll have Mr. Storkamp's testimony. Mr. Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative O'Driscoll. I don't have the entire history, but it was previously the security hospital was slightly different in its treatment for what populations that they were serving. The lines have become increasingly blurred, and over time we are serving more and more forensic patients at the security hospital for people who have sat in on many of the priority admissions task force hearings or in health or HHS committees. You'll know that the backlog as well as the crowded bed space create more dangerous conditions than I think were previously imagined, as well as the type of people who are being admitted to the.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce. Mr. Storkamp, thanks for coming back up. If you would like Representative O'Driscoll to repeat the question, that's fine. Otherwise, if you have some testimony on that question, that would be helpful.
Mr. Chair and members, thank you for the opportunity again. As I mentioned, DCT is in the process of evaluating this proposal. We've got 5 different divisions within direct care and treatment, 2 of which are in the statute. One is talking about bringing in AMRTC, but that isn't the only facility within that area. I think we need to look at the statistics and numbers around all of this and come back with a global plan on all of DCT as we kind of move forward as our own agency in the process. I think the big piece here was Department of Corrections, and DCT got lumped in several years ago, and we started evaluating more and more what should be included and didn't. And I think, again, this task force has done a great job focusing in on that one area, but we want to make sure that we're looking at the whole picture here.
Thank you, Mr. Storkamp. Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the question of the IRS timeline, I don't know that I'm overly concerned that would happen tonight or if it happens next week, because we're not going to do the bill until sometime probably in the first part of May. So I don't know that it's mission critical that it gets done tonight, and maybe give members a chance to be able to ask some questions and get some additional feedback and follow-up from this. And so I don't know that I have any more questions in the A1 amendment. My thought is that maybe we should talk about these amendments, lay the whole process over, come back and pick it up next week, as we've had a chance to talk about that, because I do want to talk with some outside people on this. And I think that's a valid concern. I don't know about the rest of you, but when we talk about the pension bill, I am the point of contact in our caucus quite regularly on everything. And I pride myself on knowing exactly what's going on in each of these things to be able to play stump the band with my caucus. And that's how we get this work that we do, the high marks that we do by the votes on the floor. And I want to make sure that we have the information that we need. So, Mr. Chair, I'm not asking that we lay it over right now. I'm still asking questions and giving us an opportunity to, but I think it'd be helpful for us to have that opportunity to be able to search out some more answers to questions.
Thank you, Representative. Better to be thorough when we have the opportunity. Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the question I got is, we heard that the lines have been blurred of who this facility in the A1 gets treated. I would have to believe the court system is committing these folks. And what is the determining factor of where these folks get placed? And does that play into why some facilities are in and some facilities are out? I guess that's a question I have, is if the court is making a determination of who gets placed where, what is that determination, and what is the differentiation? Easy for me to say. What makes the difference of who goes where?
Thank you, Senator Howe. We have the St. Peter Regional Treatment Facility in my district, and so I know a little, and essentially they are assigned to the department to be placed in a facility with certain court orders. But having said that, I think Mr. Bruce's testimony is that that is one of the things that has changed. To Representative O'Driscoll's question, how come you weren't included in the first place? And if I understood the testimony, it suggested some of that was the people that the employee comes in contact with are different than they were when they first made that. With that, that doesn't have to be satisfying. Representative Nadeau?
Senator Dunn.
So far?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the other thing, and I think Senator Pappas brought this up, the A1 has significant costs to it. And so I just don't think it's responsible for us to be even considering the A1 at this point, as much as we want. And I spend a lot of time working on AMRTC issues and the 48-hour hold bill and other DCT issues. And we have a very, very big global issue that we as a legislature need to continue to work on. And we disagree with this population being added due to the blurring of the lines. But I just don't think with the costs associated with this, it should even be in front of us at this point. But that's just me. So, and I agree with Representative O'Driscoll. I would prefer that we table this until next week, and we can spend some time with this, find out if there's some solutions that we can find, and try to reach some consensus on it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Nadeau. Other comments, questions, or concerns? Representative O'Driscoll.
Mr. Chair, and to the Pappas and Nadeau question, if we do isolate and determine those costs, whose budget's carrying that? We've already started working on that, and the House is in the process of passing its budget bills, and I'm sure the Senate's going to be doing the same. And this is going to create a fiscal question and issue when this comes out of the commission and has to go to the House Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance Committee. And where do we get the money for this? And as we've discussed in previous commission meetings, there's one-time spending that's in the Senate target right now, and there's one-time spending in the governor. And the House is the one that has the ongoing funding and different ideas that people have for already committed on that money. So where does this money come from? And do we just say to the agencies, well, you got to eat it? I don't know. And those are questions that we need to get answers to. Because there are questions, Mr. Chair, that I will be asked by members of my team and my caucus.
Good point.
Guaranteed.
Good point. Thank you, Representative O'Driscoll. First of all, just to try to address that, my understanding is this goes on the agency budget, so it's a fair point that they're interested in this, and we don't have a cost estimate. I'm open-minded to LCPR member suggestions. My instinct would be, we don't have a controversy in the underlying bill. We could put the underlying bill on and postpone the two amendments. But I'm also open to members' thoughts on that. So we don't have a motion in front of us to do that. We could lay them on the table. And I guess, open to thoughts. Senator Pappas.
Just to get this over with, Mr. Chairman, I would like to just move the underlying bill be incorporated into the omnibus bill, the LCPR 25-003.
Senator Pappas moves that the underlying bill, which is LCPR 25-003, be adopted into the omnibus pension bit. And we're going to have Ms. Lincheski make a comment, but the Pappas motion is on the record. Before we discuss or vote on that motion, Ms. Lincheski.
Yeah, I just want to address the issue of the draft bills. So the work group met during the interim, and this was a lot of work. So putting this together required bringing union reps, agency reps together with the MSRS and what they can do. Together, we came up with this consensus bill. The other two, the amendments were not consensus. That we couldn't deal with them. We couldn't stick them in the bill. So they're separate amendments. The underlying bill, though, I sent it out multiple times, soliciting comments on the bill. Since December, I was asking for review, comments. I did get some, but this is a hard group to corral. Everybody's very busy. I did what I could. I was not then able to walk around the legislature and find a legislator to introduce the bill. And I do apologize for that. We have a draft bill, but I can tell you this has been very well vetted by this group, by this work group for what it's worth. But I'd be happy to find a legislator, if I could after this meeting, to introduce this bill. If anybody wants to volunteer, I'll give you a call tomorrow and we can work it through, but that's where we were. So I'm doing what I can with limited time, resources.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Lincheski. Seeing no volunteers come rushing forward, I have Representative Nadeau and Representative O'Driscoll. We'll go to Representative O'Driscoll first, unless you want to go to Representative Nadeau.
You're the chair.
Representative Nadeau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Ms. Lincheski, thank you, and I'm sorry if I came across as being harsh. These work groups, I've sat on many of them, and they are really hard, and it's hard to corral these things, and I want to thank you personally for the work that you do on this. I would be happy to carry your underlying bill.
One volunteer, Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Nadeau. Ms. Lincheski, I value the work that you do and that your team does and the work group on here. And I recognize, the challenges that are presented to you and working with a group as diverse and bicameral as this is. And you do a pretty darn good job of this. And question, there is no fiscal issues with the underlying bill, is that correct?
Ms. Lincheski.
That is absolutely correct. Yes, this is a reorg of a statute. It's to try to get it finally in shape so that we have a statute that reflects what's actually happening, no fiscal impact.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Mr. Chair, and since we already have a proposed health author on this bill, I would ask if former Representative and now Senator Rasmussen has a desire to author this. And I realize I'm catching you flat-footed and cold on it, but maybe you can teach us a lesson about how to do this right.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and yeah, happy to take a look and
There it is.
consider introducing this
There we
as a
go.
bill. But
Thank you, Senator
I just-
Rasmussen.
And Mr. Chair, I want to make sure that the work that the LCPR staff does is incredible and much appreciated. I just think it's really important that we have legislators bring legislative proposals before the commission.
I appreciate that, Senator Rasmussen. A couple of things. First of all, I am already in trouble with certain Senate staff members for saying that the LCPR nonpartisan staff is the greatest of all time on the record earlier this session. So thank you, Ms. Wilson, Ms. Lincheski, Ms. Dieslin. Second, there is a motion from Senator Pappas before the LCPR to adopt the underlying bill with its no fiscal impact. Further discussion to that, Senator Pappas.
Mr. Chairman, and I'm happy to volunteer to be a co-author.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. Further discussion on the Pappas motion? Seeing none, all in favor of adopting the underlying bill, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The motion prevails, and the underlying bill is adopted. Members, I propose that we lay the two amendments, 1A and 2A, on the table. Any discussion to that proposal? Representative O'Driscoll?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Only because we did give time to the A1 amendment and what it was, I would like to also just have a little discussion on the 2A amendment
Right.
about the deletion of positions in statute when they are not being deleted from, for the lack of a better term, a master contract where we've identified positions. I think it's important if we've come this far that we finish the last 10% of the conversation so that members have an idea of why this was an issue or question or controversial.
Thank you, Representative O'Driscoll. We're going to have Ms. Linczewski speak to the 2A amendment. I am proposing that we lay the 1A and the 2A over, but good point. Ms. Linczewski, the 2A.
Thank you, Senator Frentz and Representative O'Driscoll. So after we had put these lists together and after going through many lists that were brought forward by DHS and DOC, we arrived at what we thought were all of the employment positions that covered employees who were in the correctional plan. Once the DHS and DOC saw these lists in the bill, they came back and asked for a number of them to be removed because there were no incumbents in the position. I understand they're accurate position titles, but they are not right now filled. So the issue was whether, and the question or the request was for us to remove them. So that's what this does. Each of these deletions are positions that are only empty, but are not, they're still active, I guess. The problem we had, again, in the work group was that the union representatives, Mr. Bruce and Mr. Vogel and others, objected to removing the positions that were still available but did not have incumbents. So we had this dispute. We could certainly go through and I could identify the positions that are being deleted, but that's the issue that we had with the 2A.
Thanks, Ms. Linczewski. Representative O'Driscoll.
That is helpful. And so the question that I have is, was there any discussion in the work group as to whether those positions that currently exist in a collective bargaining agreement or in other parts in a job description in an agency, do we ever anticipate filling those positions, or are they legacy positions that just need some housekeeping somewhere else in the legislative process to be able to bring into reality, if you will, the situation versus what statute has traditionally said what we would do and how we would work on things.
Ms. Linczewski, you maybe want to have Mr. Bruce come back up? Mr. Bruce still here? Mr. Bruce, do you need Representative O'Driscoll to ask the question again?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative O'Driscoll. They are currently still in existence in our collective bargaining agreements, which we have started our opener and started negotiations this past week. So they will likely be considered there, but considering that we have job classifications added over time, even outside of the current position descriptions, having them removed and then potentially added back in was something we just didn't want to go through because we have to come to the legislature to then add them in line by line, job class by job class to ensure that they're covered.
Well, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce. Representative O'Driscoll got the floor, but Senator Pappas.
Just real quick, Mr. Chairman, but I thought the whole purpose of the bill, the underlying bill, was that you didn't have to go to the legislature and get the job classifications re-added. You just had a little classification group. Did I misunderstand that?
Not exactly. Mr. Bruce, why don't you go first?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Pappas. So the current process is a pre-approval process by both the agencies and the employer representatives to add the job class. We still have to add it into statute.
Thanks, Mr. Bruce. Representative O'Driscoll?
Then the only other question, I think Mr. Bruce is actually saying it without saying it, and that is if it's deleted in statute, but in a collective bargaining agreement at some point in the future, that position gets filled by a current or a new incumbent in that position, then we have a problem because it's not listed in statute. And so however this moves forward, a best practice might be to work with the respective agencies and the collective bargaining agreement so that it aligns with statute, or to create some type of language that puts a pinging point that's documentable so that we don't have to be sitting here every Tuesday night between January and May trying to figure out whether or not we should be including or not including job classifications in a piece of statute.
Thank you, Representative O'Driscoll. I agree. Members, further comments on the 2A? That was for explanation purposes. Again, proposed to lay those two amendments over for consideration. All right. Thank you for that. Final item on the agenda is Senate File 1986, Senator Kupec, and House File 1779, Representative Wolgamott. We heard this bill once, members, but I'm going to have Ms. Wilson do a brief review of where we've been, and then we'll take some testifiers. And there are some amendments, including Representative Wolgamott and Representative Neto. But first, Ms. Wilson. A brief refresher, please, Ms. Wilson.
Thank you, Chair Frentz. Senate File 1986, House File 2286 applies to probation agency employees who are members of MSRS General or PERA General. The bill is 6 sections. Sections 1 through 3 apply to MSRS General. Sections 4 to 6 apply to PERA General. Sections 1 and 4 add a definition of a probation agency employee, and that exact definition can be found on page 2 of the staff memo. Sections 2 and 5 amend both the MSRS General and PERA General statutes to carve out probation agency employees from the paragraph that defines the current rate of employee contributions and adds a paragraph that will set the contribution percentage for probation agency employees. We did have a 2A amendment that this commission did pass, and that amendment added in the exact percentages for MSRS General Plan, probation agency employees. Employee contributions would be 10.35%. For PERA General Plan, probation agency employees, the contributions would be 10.79%. And then sections 3 and 6, this is where it adds the new subdivision, which provides an unreduced retirement annuity for an employee who's at least age 60 or has 35 years of service. And just note that the employee only needs to meet the age requirement or the service requirement to be eligible. Thank you, Chair Frentz.
Wilson, so again, members, we have some amendments. We also have some testifiers. Representative Wolgamott, Senator Kupec, do you want to make any opening comments before we go to the testifiers? Representative Wolgamott.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and my fellow members of the LCPR for the opportunity to once again come back to present House File 1779, the bill to provide an unreduced early retirement annuity to probation agency employees upon the retirement at age 60 or within 35 years of service. Mr. Chair, we're back again because we know how high the stakes are for these incredible men and women who are our probation officers, parole officers, supervised release officers. These are human lives at stake here, Mr. Chair. They do critical work for our criminal justice system, but it takes a toll on them. And I just want the commission to remember that these men and women are targets of violence, sexual assault, physical assault, stalking, and other threats, all because of their job in putting themselves out there. And we're back here again, Mr. Chair, and we're going to keep coming back because the history of trauma that I just explained leads to early burnout of officers, as it impairs their ability to continue to be effective agents of change and promote public safety. We're back again with this bill, the 60-35 retirement option. Our goal is to allow probation officers to retire at a reasonable time and incentivize agents to stay on the job longer. This is good for the agents, this is good for public safety, and we're back again, Mr. Chair, because, and I want to thank the members of the commission. We had a very, very thoughtful and productive conversation last month. And Mr. Chair, I want you and members to know that we took that conversation to heart. We heard some concerns, we heard some critiques, and Senator Kupec and I and the stakeholders have been working together ever since to address those concerns and critiques and to continue to advance our goal of getting support for this legislation from this commission. So again, Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to bring this bill back to the commission. We do have some testifiers that I will not steal their thunder and let them explain the work that's been done. But again, members, I appreciate your consideration and look forward to good, additional good productive discussion tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Wolgamott. Senator Kupec.
Sure. I'll just add on to that. I think, the stakeholders heard what your requests were the last time they were here, and I think they've gone back and they've done some diligent work on those requests. And so I'll just let the testifiers kind of speak to what they've done.
Thank you, Senator Kupec. Members, we have 5 testifiers. Also want to note in your packets, there's a letter from the Association of Minnesota Counties and another letter from the Minnesota Intercounty Association. With that, our testifier list begins with Aaron Leonard. Ms. Leonard, if you could come back up, please. Thank you, Ms. Leonard, for coming back up. Please give us your testimony on the file.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members. I'm Erin Leonard, the Executive Director of MSRS. So the MSRS Board does not have a position in support or opposition to this bill. Generally, the board is supportive of benefit enhancements for the plan members provided funding or contributions pay for the benefit that's received. However, in its current form, there are substantive issues with the bill that need to be addressed to make the bill administratable for us. The issues that are addressed by the 3A amendment, so primarily the past service, so any general plan service would count towards the enhanced benefit, and I think the intent of the stakeholders is that only the service that would apply to this should be service as a probation officer, so that's one component. The other component is we have special group membership in some of our plans. There's a subplan of the MSRS General plan. So the fire marshals is an example, or military affairs. We would prefer something arranged like that because then we are valuing it actuarially separately to ensure that we're collecting appropriate contributions to fund the benefit. So those are a few of the items that are addressed in the 3A amendment. So if this bill is included in the omnibus bill, we look forward to continue to working with the authors to get the language in a form that we can administer. Besides the administrative issues, we are concerned that this bill does not address the cost of this provision in a way that is equitable. So these folks will be paying over 11% of pay for their pension plan benefit. Their benefit isn't going to increase, it's just going to be collected earlier. So I just want to note that because that is a significant difference. Also, employees will be paying more than the employer's share. So in most of our plans, either the employee and employee contribution are the same or the employer contribution is higher. In this case, that will be reverse. So those are just a few of the components that we wanted to make sure you all were aware of. And we want to make sure that it is the 15-year amortization, which would be the 11.39% rather than the 30-year amortization because of the adoption of layered amortization that this commission has included in the LCPR omnibus bill. So I'd happy to take any questions, but those are our primary concerns.
Thank you, Ms. Leonard. Thank you for the constructive testimony. You might get a couple questions, but we'll have the other testifiers first. Next, we'll have Doug Anderson from PERA. Mr. Anderson, if you could come forward, please. And Ms. Stringy. Mr. Anderson, Ms. Stringy, welcome back to LCPR. If you could please introduce yourself and provide your testimony.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Commission members. My name is Doug Anderson, Executive Director for PERA.
Good evening, Chair and Commission members. My name is Amy Stringy. I'm the Policy Coordinator for PERA.
PERA opposes House File 1986, Senate File 1779 because it goes against multiple LCPR principles, does not adhere to actuarial best practices, is intergenerationally inequitable, and it sets a worrisome precedent for others to follow. Put more simply, the cost assessed to current and future probation officers is unfair to them because instead of pre-funding their own benefits, they are assessed a cost to post-fund other members' benefits. Some members will gain from this bill, but the majority will pay too much for the benefit that they get. I want to be clear that PERA's board is open to discussion regarding an earlier unreduced benefit for probation officers. In fact, PERA's board supported an actuarial study to determine the potential cost of a new plan based only on prospective service. Ms. Strangey will describe the scope of that study with her testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I would now like to explain the two biggest reasons for PERA's opposition to this bill. I do have 7 exhibits. I intend to average less than 40 seconds per page, if that's acceptable to you.
That's just fine, Mr. Anderson.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
Members, this is in your material and also up on the screen. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Reference chart 2, page 2. On the surface, this bill seems reasonable. All members receive an earlier unreduced retirement benefit and contribute an equal annual rate. However, the benefit and costs have 2 distinct components. Component number 1 is for future service, being applicable for unreduced benefits. The estimated cost is 1.41% of pay, assessed to all current and future members prospectively. This is reasonable and is not the point of PERA's concern. So far, so good. Component number 2 is for past service being applicable for unreduced benefits. This will only benefit a closed group of current members, and they will share in an estimated $49 million of benefits. The 2 issues with this component is how that cost is assessed. Issue number 1 is that current members' benefits and contributions are disconnected, resulting in some members gaining at the expense of others. And issue number 2 is that in 10 years, half of the current members will have retired or terminated, leaving half of the cost to be paid by the next generation. I want to elaborate on issue number 1, which is the disconnect between benefits and costs. Reference chart number 3. We have shown you this information before. It shows an example of the wide disparity of benefits and costs. So I'll move quickly on to the next exhibit, which is showing information for those same 2 members, just formatted in a different way. This is more of a cash flow format and shows how for one member, they would have 2 years of contributions before becoming eligible to receive annual benefits of $50,000 or more a year. Example number 2 is a new hire member who would contribute for the entire contribution period, which is set at to the year 2048. They would contribute 2.88% for their past service component, 1.41% for their future service component. Altogether, for this member, the total retirement benefit contributions would be 17% of their pay, over $10,000 for a member with a salary of $60,000. Would also note in chart number 4 that just because a member can retire at age 60, they may choose not to retire at age 60. This is not unusual, as not every member can reduce their income by 50% and still afford items such as health care. This is an important concern in that the cost for members able to retire earlier is subsidized by members that do not retire. I think this is a good opportunity here, pause on the screen, to note that a more thoughtful approach to considering an unreduced earlier retirement should also question whether the multiplier is sufficient to provide a reasonable retirement benefit at that earlier age. If members can't afford earlier retirement, what's the point of an earlier retirement option? This is why we emphasize a work group approach to this issue. The work group can also study the multiplier and the post-retirement increase that's needed that should accompany earlier retirement. On chart 5, this shows the age and service distribution of the members that are in PERA and helps explain the disconnect between the past service benefit and the contribution assessed to members. The past service benefit is based only on past service as of the effective date. The contribution period is based on age and years until 2048. The relationship is the inverse of what it should be. Those that pay for a longer period get less, and those that pay for a shorter period get more. Or another example of talking about this is that we may have one member who may pay for 20 years to get 3 years of past service benefit, while another member may pay only 5 years to get that same past service benefit. Now I'd like to shift and talk about issue number 2, which is the shifting of costs to the next generation. This is chart 6. This shows what I had previously explained at a prior hearing about how the cost shifts to future hires. In just 10 years, half of the current members, the ones that have benefited the most from this bill, will be replaced by new hires. These future probation officers may very well become future testifiers to a future LCPR asking why they are paying 2.88% of their benefits, of their pay, for benefits that a different generation received. I believe you are familiar with groups that don't like feeling that they are paying for a benefit they don't receive. On chart 7, is one solution would be to only have members receiving the past service benefit pay for the past service benefit. The estimated cost applied to these members is about 6.53% of pay, if assessed over a 15-year period. This approach would solve the issue of pushing the cost off to new hires, however, it would raise the total retirement contribution to over 20% for current members. And I'll close my testimony and turn over to Ms. Strange, and after just referencing chart 8, this is a comparison of the PERA plans, and it may highlight some issues that future hires may point out, as they may do some comparisons of what their contribution rate would be at a higher rate compared to other plans and what benefits they get for that. And they also, as Ms. Leonard pointed out, and for us, this group would be the only PERA group that has employees paying at a higher rate than their employer.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Ms. Strange. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question for Mr. Anderson. Mr. Anderson, you said that a majority of probation officers would pay too much for their benefit. And I was wondering if you could talk about what that means and how you got to that conclusion.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Senator Rasmussen, yeah, there'd be probably 3 different categories. If I reference on page 6, first would be different page 6, the new hires. So members hired after a certain point, and we're talking about the past service component, they have no past service, but they'd be paying 2.88% of pay for a benefit that they don't receive. So this is a group that would grow pretty significantly and pretty quickly. So that's one group that pays for something they will not receive. And if we go to page 5, let's say the other group would be members that have relatively low past service, but are relatively young in age. So these are the groups that are up in the top left hand of this screen. So these are members that are paying the higher contribution rate, the 2.88% for a long period of time. The math just doesn't work for them. The contributions that they're paying would be more valuable than the benefit that they ultimately get. So that's another group that would be paying more than what they would receive. And then the third group, I would say, could come from anywhere in this group. And it goes to the comment I made about just because earlier retirement's available doesn't mean that early retirement will be taken. In fact, the assumptions for this study assume only a portion of members that are eligible for the early retirement will take it. So if a member becomes eligible but they don't take the early retirement, they will have contributed for that benefit but did not gain from that. So these are all categories that would pay more than what they could gain.
Thanks very much, Mr. Anderson. Senator Rasmussen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Fault for Mr. Anderson. I'm looking at page 4. What's the y-axis on page 4?
Mr. Anderson?
Mr. Chair, Senator Rasmussen, the y-axis is the annual, either the annual contribution or the annual benefit. So the annual contribution is shown as a negative number. The annual benefit that would be paid as a positive number. So for example, member number 1, they would have 2 years of contributions. That's the small orange bar. And they would be eligible for 6 years of earlier benefit, that the 50,000 plus per year after that. That's the y-axis positive amount.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Senator Rasmussen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. I'll hold other questions until later, but
All
thank you.
right. Thank you, Senator. We're going to go to Ms. Strenge. Ms. Strenge?
Chair Friends, thank you. When considering a proposal such as the one before the commission tonight, it is important that we check the proposal against any applicable LCPR principles of pension policy. These principles are meant to guide the commission members when considering proposals. There are several principles applicable when considering this one before the commission. I'm going to focus on just 3 of them. In the category of pension benefit coverage relating to equal treatment within the pension plans, there are 2 items. There should be equal treatment of public employees in terms of the relationship between benefits and contributions. This proposal creates benefits and contributions that would not be uniform in PERA General. 2, in the category of pension funding. First, there should be a financing method that will distribute total pension costs fairly among the current and future generations of taxpayers, and that will discourage unreasonable benefit demands. Second, for general public employee retirement plans, the employee and employer should make matching contributions to meet the normal cost and the administrative expenses of the defined benefit pension plan. Both the employee and the employer also may be required to share some financial responsibility for funding the amortized requirement of the defined benefit pension plan. This proposal does not distribute the cost fairly among current and future generations, and the proposal strays from the equal sharing of contributions between employees and employees. I encourage the Commission to review the remaining principles as the Commission considers this proposal. As the Commission is considering this proposal, it is important that the Commission assess the precedent that the proposal creates. PERA General is comprised of many public employees who provide a wide range of public service, ranging from 911 telecommunicators to county attorneys to paraprofessionals. If this proposal is successful, many of these groups may seek similar proposals. Not only does this treat members within the plan differently, but also leads to administrative difficulty and risk. The bill as currently drafted has several significant policy and administrative issues. I'm going to focus on 2 of them. The bill does not require the service eligible or available for this benefit to be as a probation officer. If this is addressed by requiring some or all of the eligible service to be as a probation officer, it is important to note that there may be service that qualifies that does not have the corresponding contribution. It is also important to note that for PERA's purposes, this is a significant administrative challenge, ascribing service between non-probation service and probation service. We don't have that information. The cost of the benefit is based on assumptions. If experience does not reflect those assumptions, either there are many people who take the benefit, or if there are less people who take the benefit, there is no mechanism for PERA to address these contributions. This means that PERA General members who do not have access to this benefit are either subsidizing this, or it may mean that these members are paying too much. Either scenario is problematic. Lastly, as PERA mentioned in the previous hearing, PERA is conducting a study to explore the costs associated with creating a new public safety adjacent plan whose eligibility includes probation officers, parole officers, and 911 telecommunicators. The study explores a plan that has a 2.2% multiplier, a retirement age of 60, and the correctional plan COLA. This plan is for future service only. That group will have similar or greater benefits at a lower cost than this group. I will note that this proposal does not give anyone the access to the benefit until 2028. And by this time, PERA could have that new plan up and running.
Thank you, Ms. Strenge. Our next testifier is Nancy Haas with Kayla Grimm on deck. Ms. Haas, welcome to the Pension Commission. Please introduce yourself and present your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Nancy Haas with Pohl Haas here on behalf of the Minnesota Corrections Association, which includes all probation officers, both at the county and state level. We appreciate the opportunity to follow up from the initial hearing back in March with you tonight. We listened carefully to the comments of the commission members and have been diligently doing important follow-up work, which we want to share with you tonight. One piece of that follow-up included a survey to members. This commission and PERA discussed concerns with whether probation officers really and truly understood the proposal and the advancement of a new structure that would be self-funded and range from increases of 5.47 for PERA members and 5.39 for MSRS members. In your packet is a copy of the survey of the results. Consistent with our past engagement efforts, we had a tremendous response. If you look at the handout in the packet, you can see the exact questions we asked and the global responses by everyone and the responses by age range. We kept the age range consistent with our actuarial ranges. The highlights include the survey was open for 2 weeks. It was anonymous. 1,177 out of approximately 1,600 members responded, which is about a 75% of the total population. We had about 100 respondents who indicated they were in both plans or didn't accurately identify which plan they were with. And I will just say we had about 50 more reply between Sunday when we had to cut it off and present the information to the commission. Related to the younger generation and understanding the proposal, you can see in the first two graphs, we have just shy of 98 and 95% for all of those agents under 40 years old. We hover between 95 and 99% for all age ranges except those aged 60 to 67. You can see that number on the second page, which is more around 67%. Reminder that current age retirement for those folks is 66. Many of them are Rule of 90. Most of them are not happy with the implementation structure we set up that was just mentioned because that would mean they would pay for 2 years without a benefit. By way of an example, in our bill, we moved the effective date from the traditional July 1st or August 1st date to give them plans some opportunity to set up the new subplan by January 1st of the following year. And then we delayed the ability to start taking the benefit for an additional 2 years to deal with the intergenerational inequity discussed by PERA. We could certainly modify these should that be desired moving forward. But that brings us how do we land this plane with the concerns being raised, legitimately so, by members around the table and the plans, and still retain the support of probation officers, and to find a way to acknowledge and support their hard work, sacrifices, and contributions to a more safer community. As we all contemplate what next steps could look like, I want to highlight some of the comments made by officers, which are also summarized in your packet. And I will just note, out of the 1,177 members, we had 673 comments, which essentially represent about half of the respondents. So we chose just 20 for you to look at, and I started to go and highlight which ones I wanted to raise for you, and I highlighted them all. And so I'm not going to, in the interest of time tonight, I'm not going to mention them, but I hope you will take a look at the ones that were included in your packet because they're pretty compelling. And finally, I would be remiss if I didn't summarize all of the engagement that probation officers have done over the past 2 years to get us to this point today. Multiple meetings with MSRS and PRA, 3 town halls with probation membership and applicable impacted unions, stakeholder engagement, all probation delivery systems, hiring of an actuarial firm to both assist with analysis and survey results to get the data for that analysis to present for you. And hearing last year in this commission, you will recall we weren't quite ready with the actuarial analysis, so we had more of an informational hearing. I would offer the change this commission plans to make for the 15-year amortization and contained in a future amendment conversation. Just want to be clear that the timeline for the contribution rate for the increase is time limited to then 15 years. It's not an ongoing inequity. And so what that means is that 5.47 and that 5.39 goes back to 1.4 after 15 years. So there's not a new never-ending burden on the fund. And the important issue that has not been yet addressed directly is the conversation about the concerns related to the past service. However, there is a path forward to address these concerns. In other plans, there are caps on past service credit, or past service credit could be purchased individually. For example, this is the case in the correctional plan. But this is where we need you as commission members to help us get a solution in relatively short order. Sometimes around here, you need a little inspiration and a little encouragement to get in a room and try and come up with a solution. And sometimes that comes from leadership of the chairs, the authors, and committee members. So we encourage you to give some thought. As many of you have asked in the past, is there something additional we can do and consider between where this bill is now and nothing? So thank you for your time, all the time you have given to this important topic. We remain willing and able to work with you all in the coming weeks to move something forward this year. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Haas. Well done. We're going to have the final testifier first, then we'll go to member questions and amendments. Kayla Grimm, could you please introduce yourself and present your testimony?
Good evening, chair friends and members of the committee. My name is Kayla Grimm, and I'm 28 years old. I'm primarily here to answer questions that members may have about why young probation officers support the proposal for a reasonable retirement benefit. I've worked for Ramsey County Probation for 7 years, and I'm a member of our Teamsters Probation Union. I currently supervise a caseload of primarily high-risk clients who have committed predatory and sex offenses, including cases such as rape, kidnapping, non-consensual sexual contact, and child sexual abuse material. There are 2 things that I've learned the hard way, and I'm compelled to share them with you. First, this job is not for the faint of heart. I work with my clients effectively. To work with my clients effectively, it means that I have to immerse myself in the details of what my clients have done and why. This is a part of the job that unless you do it every day, you would truly never understand the gravity of how deeply it affects your mental and physical well-being. Second, this job changes who you are. I witness and deal with things in this job that have changed my perspective on just about everything. I used to pass by lemonade stands growing up, and my dad would always encourage me to give $1. Now I drive past lemonade stands, and I wonder, how are parents allowing their children to do this and talk with strangers and be alone, unsupervised, and I just want to protect them? Things that I used to enjoy and support, I now see from a lens of risk and danger. I have learned that working as a probation officer is an incredibly demanding and often dangerous job. I have seen and felt the emotional toll of managing cases involving trauma, manipulation, and recidivism. The physical and emotional risks are significant. Given the nature of our work and the impact that it has on us, retiring at a more reasonable age is not just a benefit, it is an absolute necessity. I have been doing this job for 7 years already, and I have dealt with some of the most unimaginable and difficult situations that you could think of. To think that I have another 38 years of this type of work before earning my full pension, it's a problem. It's a huge problem. This change needs to happen for the probation officers and the parole officers who have been here for decades, those like myself who are just in the midst of it, and those who have yet to begin, because nobody can be left behind with this. On behalf of all probation officers and parole officers in the state of Minnesota, I ask that you support the 60-35 reasonable retirement bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grimm. Thank you, Ms. Grimm. Members, that's all the testifiers I have listed. We're going to go to Senator Rasmussen and then some discussion and some amendments. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first off, I just want to say thank you to all the probation officers in Minnesota. And I don't think people understand that in Minnesota, we rely heavily on probation officers. We have one of the lowest incarceration rates in the country, but what that means is that we have also some of the highest numbers for individuals that are on community supervision. And many of the people that are on community supervision in other states would be in prison. And I think that's important to understand, the stress and the hard and important work that our probation officers do. And I appreciate all those who have reached out to share their stories and to talk not just about pension issues, but other issues they face in their profession, in their line of work. The big concern for me is the intergenerational equity piece with this bill. And Mr. Chair, I go back to all the conversations I've had with Tier 2 teachers. And one of the big concerns that I hear about from the Tier 2 teachers is that they're paying for someone else's benefit. They're paying for someone else's benefit, that they were stuck with this unfunded liability and they're having to pay more because of it. And so Mr. Chair had a question for the bill author, because I know he also has a bill on teacher pensions. It was to the bill author, do you think it's fair for someone to pay for a benefit that they're not enjoying that is going to be an unfunded liability going forward for them?
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. Before the chair makes a comment or two to that point, Representative Wolgamott or Senator Kupec. Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question, Senator Rasmussen. I think it's fair to listen to these probation officers and these agents, and hopefully it looks like you got in your packet the responses. I guess I take their word for it that this is something that they want to do, that they feel like is in the best interest of themselves and their profession and our criminal justice system. So that's why we're bringing this bill forward. I think we had our discussion on the teacher pension bill a couple of weeks ago, but I'm looking at this bill that's before us and listening to the stakeholders who are bringing it forward.
Thank you, Representative Wolgamott. Before we go back to Senator Rasmussen, Senator Kupec, anything you want to add?
Sure, I'll chime in a little bit here. I would say also, over the interim break we just had here, I met with a lot of teachers who are concerned about that, and certainly as you head out towards the western part of Minnesota, that we're on the border there, the pension thing also becomes a little bit of a recruitment tool, and I think those newer people who are coming into the field, they want to know also that they'll have that earlier retirement ahead of them, as you heard here from also from the probation officers. So I think while they may be paying in a little bit more, they're also going to get that benefit of that earlier retirement.
Thank you, Senator. Before I go back to you, Senator Rasmussen, it's probably worth noting the difference I see is that this group has brought forward a survey suggesting that the intergenerational inequity issue has been discussed, that they understand it and they support it. Groups are allowed to present their testimony. We also have a 28-year-old testifying that she understands it and wants us to pass it. Having said that, it's a perfectly legitimate question. Back to you, Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would ask members to take a look at page 6 that in the packet that PERA provided for us. And my reading of this is that the majority of the unfunded liability created in the current proposal would be paid for by future members, people that were not included in the survey. And I guess, Mr. Chair, that I just want to see if anyone refutes that, because that's my reading of page 6, or if I'm reading it correctly, that a majority of the unfunded liability would be paid for by people that are not yet probation officers. And Mr. Chair, that's when we looked at what happened with in 1989, when Tier 2 teacher issue, the Rule of 90 was created and ended in one day, again, you couldn't have really surveyed the Tier 2 teachers because they weren't teachers yet. And you couldn't have asked them, how are you going to feel about paying for someone else's benefit for decades? And I want to get to a lower retirement age for probation officers. I support that. I think the work they do warrants it. And I applaud the work that has been done up to this point. But I think this intergenerational transfer issue does have to be addressed, because otherwise some other future LCPR is going to be sitting here and they're going to say, I've been paying a huge percentage of payroll to pay for someone else's benefit, and then we're going to have more concerns. And so I just wanted to put that out there, Mr. Chair, and see if anyone disagrees with that, because if I'm reading this incorrectly, I want to make sure I know.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. First of all, members have the 1A amendment in their packet, which I think speaks to the question of the 15-year amortization, which it is presented to us that would address some of the concerns about future members of this body. We had talked about having Mr. Anderson and Ms. Strenge come back up, but since the 1A is not adopted, just sharing with you, Senator Rasmussen, a 15-year amortization would address and eventually bringing into the generational inequity question. With that, it's up to members of the LCPR. Let's continue our discussion, and we'll offer some amendments. Members, further discussion before we go to actual amendments being offered? Seeing none, Representative Wolgamott, we have 3A amendment.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to offer the 3A amendment.
All right. Representative Wolgamott offers the 3A amendment. And so part of that discussion, let's go to Representative O'Driscoll. Representative O'Driscoll.
Mr. Chair, what's our plan tonight?
I think we're going to, I think the chair would support having a thorough discussion, talking about the amendments, and then giving another week minimum to have them work on this.
So I just heard that we're moving an amendment. Is that the plan, to mark up this bill tonight with amendments, or to put the amendments on the table and then consider the best of practices and try to come back next week? Or what's the plan?
Representative O'Driscoll, as you may recall, we've already adopted the 2A amendment to this bill and then laid the entire bill over. I am open to adopting further amendments, but I think the smartest move is to lay the underlying bill over, whether or not it is amended, for at least a week, but open to LCPR members' thoughts on that.
Mr. Chair, you're the chair, but I would like to go back to, before we did the amendments, you asked if anybody else had any questions, and then all of a sudden we're into the amendments, and so my mind had shifted. I did have some thoughts that I wanted to share. If it's not appropriate for me to share them at this time, let me know when the appropriate time is, and I'd be happy to share some additional thoughts and considerations.
Representative, it's very appropriate, and why don't we do that right now? Members meant to signal we can have discussion of a general type before we go to the amendments, so I know Representative Wolgamott would be happy to withdraw momentarily the 3A, right, Representative Wolgamott?
Mr. Chair, I look forward to hearing what Representative O'Driscoll has to say, and therefore I will temporarily withdraw the A3 amendment.
Thank you for that accommodation, Representative Wolgamott. Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Wolgamott. The concern that I have, and I've been hearing from more individuals, is the 7.65% Social Security and Medicare that people are already paying, the 6.5%, and now the additional part on here. That puts it close to 20%, about 19.5% of pay. And what I continued to hear tonight was, as people retire on the higher end, they will will have been paying nothing or less than the people who will be coming in on the other end. So we're relying very heavily on the new hires, who probably have student debt, who need to provide shelter, who need to pay for medical benefits, who need to pay for union dues, who need to pay for insurance and their benefits. And what I fear is that after the hard work that these people do, and I 100% agree that we've got these people misclassified, they need to be in the adjunct program that PERA is talking about and advocating for, along with some other folks. And then we set up a plan for these folks, and we treat them in a different category than general, and not at the level of law enforcement. And that's what they're asking for. And I'm 100% in agreement with that. But what I fear is this, that as the testifier who was here today was saying that, and you pointed out at a younger age, what happens to that individual who wants to, not just testifier specifically, what happens when we have a young person who wants to start a family who can't because they don't have the resources, because money is being put into their pension out of their pocket. Pension principle number 3 that we've worked at and operated under talks about an even sharing of this. And I think it's very important that we underscore the fact that this will be the only program in all of our pensions and all the time that I've been here that we're going to ask employees to pony up more than the employer is. More than what sworn law enforcement and firefighters are going to do. That just doesn't make sense to me that we would do that. And the concern that I have is that as people get in and they find that the stress of the job that they want to be compensated for is also met with the stress of finances on here, that we're going to be back here with folks saying, our recruiting, our retention is down and is stepping away. Because we're hearing that from teachers right now who just went through a program like this for the last 30 years. And we're trying to rectify that. And on the eve of doing that, we're trying to put a plan in that disadvantages the employees. So what I predict is going to happen is that at some point, probably sooner rather than later, We will have folks who will be coming back, and we'll have bills in front of this pension commission that will say, we've got a problem with retention. We've got a problem with recruitment. We can no longer have these workers pay 11.8% of their pay. Because if that's the case, that this isn't a problem, then we should have done this 12 years ago. I think what we're going to see is that they're going to come back and they're going to say, more of this needs to be shifted to the employer. And where that drops in the finances of the state of Minnesota, no one knows. If it happens 2 years from now, where we have a $6 billion projected deficit in the tails right now, who's going to tell these folks, nope, you got to keep paying that? Sorry, we're going to have to go short with probation officers and coworkers in your profession. That's what we're up against. And people could say, well, you're speculating, Representative O'Driscoll, you're fear-mongering. No, I'm actually basing it on, I think, pretty good outcomes from what I've seen of human nature and what I've seen of people in various professions. And then, just like we had the question tonight about the fiscal cost and the A1 amendment there, and I asked, where are we going to get that money from? Are we going to force that to the agencies and tell them they have to eat it? Same question here. Are we going to force this to the agencies? Are we going to force this to the counties without further compensation to the counties because it's the right thing to do? Because we should have looked at trying to figure something out early on. A work group identifying the people that are necessary to go into this plan is fair to those individuals. It is fair to the state of Minnesota, and it's fair to the people that they serve. And I have to tell you, I have spent many hours talking to many people that maybe not all of you have had a chance to talk to, who are afraid to come out and talk in public about this, and they're scared. They're scared. And if you take a look at the survey results, and the first page, lower right-hand corner, it says under 40, 324 people responded. 57% of people responded. That's over 40% of people who didn't respond that were under the age of 40. They're the ones who are going to be asked to shoulder the burden of an 11.8 to 11.9% contribution, no additional employer contribution. It seems to me that's the group that needs the money coming in the household the most. They've got the young children. They're putting money away for college. They want a better lifestyle for themselves and their family. I grew up in a household where stress is part of the job. My father was in law enforcement. And that's why I'm on this pension commission, is to make sure people get treated fairly on here. And I don't know that asking people to pick up the entire burden themselves is being fair. And unfortunately, I don't have the money to be able to give to people to make this fair. So I'm in a very, very tough spot. But I do know that we need to do something. But to ask employees or to make people feel that they have to come to us and ask for the money out of their pockets to get a benefit, that I've heard people say, oh, probation officers, I have a lot of respect for probation and correction officers. And we should honor what they want to do, take more money out of their pocket. I can't sleep at night doing that. That, to me, it has a moral consequence to it. When we're going to ask people who didn't even have a chance to vote on this to share their opinion, to continue to pay for this, we will pay as a society on this. We'll have people incarcerated longer because we don't have people in the probation chain to be able to work with this. I'm looking around the room, I'm getting people going, where did this guy come from? What's his ideas? I'm pretty sure that if we got back together here 10 years from now, people would be kind of going, yeah, I think you were probably right on where we were at. Because I've got 30 years of teachers who are telling me this is what's going on. And I'm going to have 30 years with probation officers and the questions and the concerns going forward. I'm 100%, I'm ready to lay bets on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative O'Driscoll. All right, members, we can have more discussion to the general bill, or we can move to amendments. Any members who want to make further comments or questions to the underlying bill? If not, we'll go to the author, Representative Wolgamott. Did you want to offer the 3A amendment?
Mr. Chair, if there are no other members that seek to speak at this time, I would like to once again offer the 3A amendment before the committee.
Thank you. Representative Wolgamott offers the 3A amendment. Representative, to your amendment.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and members, for considering the 3A amendment. It was explained a little bit earlier, but I'll just let you know that it basically does three things. It clarifies the initial intent of the bill that the benefit applies to probation officer employment service only. That was input that we got from conversations with MSRS. Second, it makes it so that probation officer is narrowly defined to include only those employment positions identified in that survey file that was sent to GRS. And then third, as was mentioned, it makes the contribution rate is the 15-year amortization rate, not the 30-year. That's the amendment, and I would ask for members' support.
Thank you, Representative Wolgamott. We'll go to member questions. I think we maybe want to have Mr. Anderson come back up and talk about the 15-year amortization portion of the 3A amendment. But first, let's see if there's member questions or concerns. Senator Rasmussen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question was for Mr. Anderson, so I'd appreciate him coming back up.
All right. Mr. Anderson, if you would come back up. I realize we're running late here, members and members of the public, but this is important. Mr. Anderson, thank you for coming back up to testify. I think Senator Rasmussen and I and others are interested in the portion of the 3A amendment that would create the 15-year amortization. And since you testified to concerns about generational inequity and to my ear suggested they would be never-ending, perhaps you could limit your testimony to that part of the 3A amendment. Thank you. Mr. Anderson.
Okay, yes, Mr. Chair. And I think the question is about the impact of changing the amortization period to 15 years on the costs. We had identified before that when it was a longer amortization period to 2048, about half of the past service cost is paid by current members and half by future members. There still would be a significant portion paid by future hires. I haven't calculated what that would be, but it's probably at least 40% of the past service cost is still going to be paid by future hires with a 15-year amortization amount.
Senator Rasmussen, if you have follow-up questions for Mr. Anderson. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Anderson. So what you're saying is that even if the 3A is adopted, that there still is this intergenerational inequity between both future members that aren't even probation officers today, that they'll be still paying for new liabilities created with this bill, and that there'll still be the concern for earlier career current members that they'll also be getting, as you kind of pointed out earlier, they'll be paying too much for their benefit. Is that, if this amendment is adopted, is that true, or does this amendment address any of those key concerns?
Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Chair, Senator Rasmussen, I would still be concerned about the intergenerational inequity part because the past service cost of $49 million is going to be paid over 15 years, depending on who is in the plan, for this plan at that time. The information I had from the GRS, the actuary that did the study, is that over the course of 15 years, the current membership is going to drop from 1,300 down to about 300. Future hires are going to grow to by about 1,000. So that future group over 15 years that's paying the $49 million is going to be a declining group of current members and an increasing group of future hires. So the future hire part is still an intergenerational inequity concern of PERA's.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one quick follow-up. Mr. Anderson, have you, with this amendment, I don't know when you got it, but were you able to conduct the analysis that you had presented for the underlying bill?
Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Chair, Senator Rasmussen, no, I do not have the numbers specifically for that scenario.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think that's important information for us to have, I think, when considering this amendment is, is just understanding that intergenerational inequity piece and having, I think, the helpful analysis that was put together in the underlying bill. I think having that for other scenarios would be helpful as well.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. I agree with you that we need a little more specificity, although it was my impression of the 15-year amortization and the 3A amendment that that would bring an end at some point to the intergenerational inequity, and that would hasten the balancing of the books for the plan, but that's a different discussion. We're clearly looking at a future dollar amount that they're going to provide. Members, other questions, comments, or concerns to the 3A? Senator Nelson.
Mr. Chair, I'm just trying to see in the 3A, will you identify, please, what lines change the amortization from 30 years to 15?
Senator Nelson, I'm going to refer that to Ms. Lincheski, who has the amendment right in front of her. Ms. Lincheski.
Line 1.28 provides the additional contribution that will have to be made by members of the MSRS plan. So that is the MSRS amount, so that's in addition to, I believe, the 6% that MSRS folks are paying in the general plan. And then for the PERA plan, if you look over at line 2.3, which is for page 3 of line 6 of the bill, that amount is an additional 5.47%. And that's what the PERA folks will pay, in addition to the basic, the base contribution of, I think, 6.5% for those people.
Thanks, Ms. Lincheski. Senator Nelson.
Mr. Chair, so what would those total contributions be then, if in fact it were the 15-year amortization? I think we need to see those numbers in black and white to get a good grip on those.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. I agree with you. Ms. Lincheski, do you want to have any further comment on that?
Yeah, Chair Frenson, Senator Nelson. So if you look at the 1A amendment and the 2A amendment, they're total numbers. So they take the base contribution and add in the additional contribution. The 1A is a higher, these are both higher numbers you'll see. The 1A is what the cost would be to the members over a 15-year period, whereas the 2A, which is the one that was adopted, it's a smaller number. That amortizes the liability to 2048. So it's a 23-year amortization period. So you can see the totals are here, and they are different. It's about 1% or so for each of them, is the difference in the 15-year versus the 23-year.
Thank you, Ms. Lincheski. Senator Nelson. Good?
I understand what you're saying. I am not I want to see it all on one page. I want to see exactly and compare those numbers. I think that would just be a very helpful thing.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, to this point, so, and I just want to make sure I understand, if I were a starting probation officer, and I forget what starting salaries were modeled in here, if it was $60,000, I'm just trying to, under this amendment, if adopted, if I were starting, getting $60,000, what percentage of my pay would be going out of my paycheck to PERA and to Social Security? Do we have a sense of what that total amount would be with this amendment?
We do, Senator. I believe that number is 11.97%. That's found on page 3, line 6. And just for context, members, we put on the 2A amendment previously, which is to amortize to 2048. So that's the way it sits now. The 3A amendment and the percentages would adjust so that it is essentially a 15-year amortization. But the answer to your question, Senator, is 11.97. Senator Rasmussen.
Clear as mud.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And is that I'm just trying to, could Ms. Lincheski walk through what's included in that 11.97? Is that the PERA contribution, employer, employee, and Social Security?
She's sitting right here, Ms. Lincheski.
So again, I'm just going to go back to the 1A. Yeah, so that is a combination, it's the total of the 6.5 plus the new amount that would be required. So a new employee coming into the MSRS situation would be paying 11.39% of their pay to MSRS for this. That would be the total employee contribution. For the PERA plan, it's 11.97. That's the total base plus the new amount that's being added on to pay for this benefit.
Thanks, Ms. Lincheski. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think what I'm hearing is that if you were to take that total employee contribution plus an employer contribution plus Social Security, I think that puts you above 20% am I understanding that correctly, that 20% of payroll would be going towards Social Security and PERA, both from employer and employee?
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. Notwithstanding that the 1A amendment is not yet adopted, I believe your math is correct and also consistent with the testimony of PERA earlier. Senator Rasmussen, good to go. Other member comments? Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm not sure if Mr. Anderson or Ms. Leonard could answer this part of the question. Well, let's just say in the context of PERA, maybe if we can get Mr. Anderson or Ms. Stringy to come back. The question I have is, if we have a 15-year amortization on here, does that actually capture the liability that this would create to the plan to be paid off in that 15-year period of time versus carrying it out to 2048? Because we did adopt the amortization recommendations at our last meeting or the meeting before to put everybody at 15 years. This one's still an outlier. I want to make sure that we're capturing the liability and paying it within that work group that's benefiting from that. I just need to have documentation of that, just for the benefit of everyone here and for the benefit of the commission.
I appreciate that, Representative O'Driscoll. I know, again, we're running late, but I think we should have Mr. Anderson come back up to address that. Mr. Anderson promised this the last time. So, Mr. Anderson, thank you for your patience. Thanks for your work and testimony. I believe the question is, should the amendment be adopted, how does that leave the plan with the ability to recapture? And if you want Representative O'Driscoll to follow up, we can do that. Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Chair, Representative O'Driscoll, I believe the amortization work group recommends a 15-year amortization period. So that would be the preferred amortization period to develop the recommended contribution rate.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Anderson, the reason that the recommendation is 15 years is regardless if it's PERA General or what we're contemplating here or any of the other plans, is to try to keep that moving target with your work career, that those benefits that you're paying and the contribution rates are being matching the employee benefit as you're going through the system. Is that correct?
Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Chair, Representative O'Driscoll, that is correct.
And Mr. Chair, one final question for Mr. Anderson. If it is longer than that 15-year period of time to do that amortization, are we then bleeding into others that are not receiving the benefit but being asked to pay for that benefit that would be outside of that moving target that we're talking about with the amortization?
Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Chair, Representative O'Driscoll, that would be correct. It would be impacting future hires further out into the future.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Anderson, for coming back up. You're off the hook for tonight. Thank you, Representative O'Driscoll. Members, the 3A amendments before us. Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly appreciate the desire of the probation officers and to retire early, and I appreciate how hard the job is, and I applaud you for doing that. I do have concerns about the high amount that probation officers will be paying with this number plus Social Security. And that except for the older members, I'm not quite understanding the benefit for the younger members. I think they might be better off putting that extra money into an IRA and saving it for their retirement. So we made a mistake. Before I was on the Pension Commission, thank goodness, with the rule of 90. Was well-intended, get some older teachers to retire, hire some younger teachers, but we created a huge inequity in that system. And I think we really have to be really cautious about what we're doing here, where we're fair to all the probation officers. We've talked a lot about generational equity. I just think it's just, this idea is just not ready for prime time. It just really needs some work, some more work. We really need to move forward cautiously. And I know you started last year and a lot of work has been putting into this, but I'm feeling like we're not ready here yet.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. Members, other comments, questions? We're on the 3A amendment. Seeing none. Representative Wolgamott, any last comments? Assuming you want us to put the 3A amendment to a vote?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, members, I appreciate the thoughtful conversation on this. Is the author of the bill, I would ask that you respect or appreciate your courtesy of my having the ability to get the bill in the shape I'd like it in. So thank you for your consideration, members.
All right, thank you, Representative Wolgamott. And just to be clear, members, this is the 3A amendment. It is the chair's intention to lay the bill over for a minimum of 1 week, regardless of whether amendments go on. With that, all in favor of adopting the 3A amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay.
No.
The motion prevails, and the amendment is adopted. Division is called for. Members who, on the 3A, vote aye, raise your hands. 1, 2, 3 on the Senate side. Senator Westland, I can't see if your hand is up. On the 3A amendment? All right. With that, the count is that a majority of the Senate does not support the 3A amendment. The motion does not prevail. The 3A is not adopted. We have other amendments, Representative Wolgamott, and we have Representative Neto has an amendment as well. I don't have them in a particular order. You want to go to Representative Neto?
That's certainly fine, Mr. Chair.
All right, Representative Neto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Wolgamott. I've come around and around and around on this bill. I think I'm one of the only people here that actually offered an amendment last year that was asking employees to fully fund a benefit, and I was the only person that voted yes in this committee on that bill. It's lonely, and I appreciate the work that you're doing to try to help the probationers. And so my amendment, Mr. Chair, hopefully finds a path forward, because that's what I'm trying to do. As a county employee, I work with a lot of probation workers. I work with a lot of people in our criminal justice system. And just like teachers today, their job is changing dramatically. And so what I'm proposing is a work group. And this is a short-term work group. It builds on the work that was done in the previous prior. And so I'm just going to go through it quickly. It looks at public safety adjacent employees. And so the membership of this is based on PERA, it's MSRS. There's 2 state agency members in here. There's 3 professional unions that we've written in here. There's 4 county groups in here, and there's a number of others. And it also keeps it open so that if we missed someone that needs to be addressed, that the commission executive director can appoint that person. It requires that we appoint these people by June 14th of this year. So this is actually moving fast. So these organizations have to submit the list of names, and then it goes on to look at the scope of what it is that we're trying to do. Do we create a new PERA pension, or do we do something similar? And do we do something similar to what PERA has done with corrections? It looks at MSRS. Should they create another subgroup, or is there something else to do? It goes on further in the subdivision 3, where it identifies that we look at public safety adjacent employees. So do we add 911? Do we add parole? Do we add forensic scientists to this group so that we can address more than one thing? The nuts and bolts of this amendment is, and what this work group is supposed to do, is basically come up with a new plan, a new component plan that addresses these needs. It also requires that the study, we look at, it has requirements in here for what this work group is going to study. Most importantly, it specifically lists your bill. All of it in your bill. The bill has to be studied. Post-service, the post-service liability, the future benefit improvements. Also, it looks at the study prepared that's coming out from PERA that they're working on right now. That's part of it. The fiscal impact that results from potential cessation of those benefits, that's in it as well. And it requires that this plan be operational by January 1st of 2027. And it requires that this work group bring back that proposal to this body by the 2026 legislative session. With that, Mr. Chair and members, I'll take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Representative Neto. And just to be clear, you're offering the DE1?
Yes.
All right, Representative Neto offers the delete everything 1 amendment to S1986. Let's go first to the authors of the bill, whether or not this is a friendly amendment, encourage response. Representative Wolgamott or Senator Kupec?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Nadeau, for bringing this amendment forward. I really do appreciate you, trying to find solutions, trying to find ways to move forward. I'm going to respectfully ask for members to vote no on the amendment. After consulting with the stakeholders who have been working on this bill, they feel that there's been sufficient engagement and studying, and they actually put forward $20,000 for a study, and no need to reinvent the wheel. So again, Representative Nadeau, appreciate you bringing this forward and your thoughtfulness on this, but I'm going to respectfully ask members to vote no.
Senator Kupec?
I would go along with Representative Wolgamott if that's what the stakeholders would prefer to move forward. We have been going at this for a couple of years, so I will defer also to Representative Wolgamott on this.
Thank you, Senator. Comments, questions to the delete everything amendment? Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And question for either of the bill authors. In your underlying bill, when does the benefit increase actually occur? When would individuals be able to take advantage of that benefit increase?
Representative Wolgamott.
I'll defer to Ms. Lincheski.
Ms. Lencheski.
January 1, 2028.
Thanks, Ms. Lencheski. Senator Rasmussen.
So just make sure, it's January 1 of 2028, is that correct? Okay, it looks like it's correct. And a question for the amendment author, Mr. Chair, Representative Nadeau, if in your working group, when would a potentially new plan, when would that have to be implemented as a part of your working group requirement?
Senator Rasmussen, Representative Nadeau.
January of 2027, it has to be ready to be implemented.
Thanks, Representative. Senator Rasmussen.
Mr. Chair, thank you. And I think that's important for us to understand with this DE is that this could actually have a solution sooner than potentially the underlying bill. And Mr. Chair, my unsolicited advice to the bill authors would be, I don't know if your underlying bill has enough support in this commission. And my biggest concern is us leaving this session without doing anything again for probation officers. I think there is a lot of interest and willingness to understand that the job that probation officers do is really important. It's really unique and it has unique stresses, and it deserves a earlier retirement benefit, an enhanced retirement benefit. And I think, Mr. Chair, that this DE amendment will actually help get there sooner than having a proposal that doesn't have the support of the commission and then just losing yet another year versus starting on this now and having a plan that can be started on January 1 of 2027. And so I appreciate Representative Nadeau coming forward with this to try to make sure we can take action this session.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. We'll go to Representative O'Driscoll and then to the author, Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make my comments brief. Representative Nadeau, I appreciate you bringing this forward, and I will be supporting the DE amendment tonight. And Senator Rasmussen, thank you for your comments on that as well. And the one that I'm going to reiterate is the comment that you made that you don't know if there's support in this commission. This is a cross-section of the Minnesota House and Senate, Republicans and Democrats. And if we are having a difficult time for the third time, we're going to be dealing with this next week or in the future, when we go back and we bring the entire pension bill to the Senate floor and to the House floor, we run the risk of doing everything that we have done and just negating it. So all of the COLA work that we were doing for people who are out there right now in PERA and MSRS, because of the work that we've done and the improvement to the plans, all of the amortization work, all of the other stuff that we've put in tonight and that we've been working on night after night after night on Tuesday nights for quite a while will be completely negated if we can't pass it off either the House and or the Senate floor. And that is a real possibility of what I'm getting vibes from this commission. And if we want to roll the dice and put it in there and see what happens, nobody gets anything, including the plan that's before us in this bill. What we do get is we do get a work study group that brings a answer back. We preserve all of the other work that this commission has done. And if that's not acceptable to folks, I'm going to say let's send this separately and see what the House and the Senate want to do with this and leave the good work that we've had in the pension bill so that we can see that, to see what happens on that, because I do believe, and Senator Pappas and I have been around for a while on this, and we know that it takes 3 and 4 years sometimes to get stuff done. We've had bills that haven't passed one chamber or the other. We've had bills that have been vetoed by governors. We've had to go back and work time and time again to get this. My counsel is take the bird in the hand right now, because the two in the bush is going to be real problematic for everyone who's got a horse in this race, plus the other work that we're going to be looking at doing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative O'Driscoll.
Mr. Chair,
Representative Wolgamott.
Mr. Chair.
And then we'll.
I just kind of wanted to respond to what Senator Rasmussen has said.
Let's stay in order, first of all. I had Representative Wolgamott. After Representative Wolgamott, we will go to Senator Nelson. Representative Wolgamott.
Mr. Chair, just in response to what Senator Rasmussen said and the conversation that's been unfolding as we're debating the DE amendment, I was wondering if we could perhaps hear from some of the stakeholders who might be here to get their response on the study or going forward without this amendment in the bill.
We can have further testimony, Representative Wolgamott. I think the case has been made that the existing stakeholders have done a survey and indicated they're interested. But I think points that are being made here by LCPR members are also valid. It's the chair's suggestion that we lay this over a week and allow that final week to take place. That does not mean we can't adopt an amendment. And of course, we're free over the next 2 meetings to make whatever changes we want to any point of it. To Representative O'Driscoll's point, fat chance we're going to send a bill out of here that puts the whole bill at risk. It'll have to make it on the merits, just like every other piece of the pension omnibus bill. So yeah, my pledge that if we don't get it worked out, it's not going in the omnibus bill. Open to sending it separately, but I think there's clearly more work to do. With that, let's go to Senator Nelson. Senator Nelson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm somewhat relieved to hear that plan because I think this is an incredibly important discussion. And I do fear that this just isn't quite ready yet. And I was very cautious about adding the amendments that would make it so that going forward, there wouldn't be a place to go for another year or two. And that's why I guess I wanted to speak tonight, just to speak to the DE1. And that I really appreciate being able to get the many questions that have been asked here addressed. And we must do these things in a very thoughtful, sustainable way. And I can speak to you as one of those Tier 2 teachers. What sounded good back in 1989 has caused significant issues going forward. And we do not want to do that to our probation officers. And I can't even imagine how difficult that job is. And my concern is if we were to adopt the bill that is before us today, that it would further limit the ability to get new probation officers, which would be very disastrous in the bill that we're moving forward. So because of such a high percentage, 20% of pay, that's a big percent of pay to put out there. And then to be paying for the retirement of those who are going to be retiring in a year or two at this greater benefit. So I speak very strongly in favor of the DE1 in an effort that we can actually move forward and do what is needed for our probation officers. But I just do not think the bill before us today is it. I think it would be very it'd be very difficult. I would just leave it at that.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. I see Ms. Haas return to the testifier stand. We're looking for a little bit of stakeholder input on the DE1. Ms. Haas, you've already introduced yourself, but if you have testimony to present on that amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I want to start by saying thank you to Representative Nadeau for really trying to find a way forward. The one thing I will just say, you've seen our survey, you know how many people are at stake here. I have not had the ability and time to consult with them about your amendment in terms of, going in that direction. So I just want to say thank you for offering it. I appreciate the conversation tonight around having a little bit more time to have those conversations. One thing that's really important when you're talking about if a study group like this would be in place and have a recommendation before our bill currently as drafted would take place. It's very important to understand if the new plan is going to be prospective only or if it's going to include current members. And so I just leave that with you as we sit here for the next week. That's what is important to the membership, is what are we contemplating in terms of that next study. So I just share that observation, appreciate the dialogue and the commitment to continue to have a conversation over the next week or two.
Thank you, Ms. Haas. Members, other questions, comments, or concerns? Representative Neto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you. And can I ask PERA to come up and give their opinion on this as well and answer maybe the question that Ms. Haas addressed with, we're talking, that's one of the biggest issues that we're addressing here is the post-service liability and who pays for that. So, and they are coming. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Neto. Mr. Anderson already promised you wouldn't have to come back up, so only Ms. Strange can testify. Representative Neto, why don't you repeat your question and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you. Ms. Haas just asked about the past service liabilities, and making sure that as we go through this work group, that we're going to look at the current employees and not just look at a future benefit. Can you talk to that issue?
Mr. Anderson or Ms. Strange.
Okay, Mr. Chair, Representative Nadeau, I think that with the work group, the options are quite wide to look at, and I think it's very reasonable to consider the potential for some component of past service, not like what we've seen in this bill where it's unlimited to entire, 20, 30-year history, but there is the potential to look at that as long as there's some clear understanding about who is exactly benefiting and who is paying, but I think there's a potential to look at that option.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Representative Nadeau or Ms. Strange, did you want some other testimony?
Mr. Chair, yes, I would just like to add one comment. The working group was purposely put together to bring employers and employees to the table on this conversation, and I think providing that structure, the plan that we have as a study is, it's the basis, right? And that doesn't dictate what is going to come out of the working group. It provides us with information. But bringing both the employers and the employees to the table on this and kind of steering that conversation, I think is vital to us going forward.
Thanks, Ms. Strange. Representative Neto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, further comments to the DE1 amendment before we put it to a vote? Members, again, unless Representative Wolgamott. Representative Wolgamott and Senator Kupec. Senator Kupec.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members. I might just ask, as this is a substantial kind of amendment and change, that maybe if we took a week on the amendment to just kind of let the stakeholders digest that, think about it, see what this all means, that might be a good step forward also. And because I also really love coming here on a Tuesday night to spend time with you, again, I would love to do that.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Wolgamott to the DE1.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was going to say the same thing that my Senate author just said. I think that it might be good for the committee to consider tabling this amendment, because as Senator Kupec said, it is a consequential change to the bill, and we just want to make sure we have proper time to get stakeholder engagement. After seeing how things have played out the last two committee hearings, I think it would be best for us all to make an informed decision on where the stakeholders are at before we make a decision on voting on this amendment.
Thank you, Representative Wolgamott. Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just again for the legislative process, I can tell you that I know our schedule from the House and how we're moving bills for the next to May 4th. And one of the reasons we are back here is because this is where both the Senate and the House chambers are, and that by rule, we are not allowed to meet as a commission or a committee if either the House or the Senate is in session at that point. So even though we may have Tuesday nights, and even though we may be in recess, House and or Senate, deliberating other bills that are there, we may not be able to meet as a commission, which means the clock continues to run out, which means that if we don't take the bird in the hand, there may not be the two in the bush, because the commission may say, we don't have the ability to take this up, and we're going to close up the hatches and run to the runway with what we have in the way of bills and move forward from there. That is a strong possibility when we are less than 30 days away, and conference committees are going to be forming and coming. So as regardless of what happens, if we lay this over, I want stakeholders to give serious consideration to something, or the commission, as has been suggested, doesn't maybe have the support for this. And the chair, at his own words, said, we can't put something in to jeopardize the work of the rest of the work of the commission. So just some friendly, sage advice from somebody who's been around this place for a while.
Thank you, Representative O'Driscoll. It's good advice. Members, we have the DE1 in front of us. It is a substantial change to the bill. It was my intention to ask that we amend the bill or not amend it and then lay it over for a week. I think my concern with the DE1 amendment is that we would be telling everybody there will be no assurance of this pension benefit improvement for a long time, when they would hope to see some action on this. And I think keeping that hope alive for me is worth another week. I do think we'll meet next week, but I respect all the points that people have made. And members, we came here knowing that we'd have to vote on amendments and let the chips fall where they may, as I like to say. So we're going to do that. Representative Nadeau, if you want us to put this to a vote, I'll call for a roll call on it. I think the alternative would be to lay it on the table now and postpone that amendment talk for a week, or any other options that any other members want to consider. It's clear the bill as currently written does not have the votes to pass both the House and the Senate with the majority. So I think a week's time is not too much to ask for the probation officers and other members of the community that want to see this benefit improvement. With that, open to suggestions. I see a nod from the author. Representative O'Driscoll.
Mr. Chair, my suggestion would be that since the commission has had an opportunity to digest this for the first meeting, we spent quite a bit of time on it, so there's not going to be any question that we didn't give this a thorough vetting. I think that Representative Wolgamott's suggestion of letting the work group digest this, or excuse me, letting the stakeholders digest what's happening on here, laying the amendment over, knowing that that may be the thing that we end up doing if there is not support on the rest of it, would make sense. What I would hate to have happen is have that amendment go and not be able to be amended, and then we are in a situation where we're digging ourselves deeper into a hole of not being able to do anything for these people that everyone around the table recognizes something needs to be done.
Thank you, Representative O'Driscoll. I wholeheartedly support where you're coming from, but let's give a word here to Representative Nadeau.
And thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members, and thank you, Representative Wolgamott. I respectfully will defer to you, and because we all, I think, we might disagree sometimes on how we go places, but we very seldom disagree on where we want to go. And so with that, I will, respect Representative O'Driscoll and your opinion, and happy to lay this over for further discussion.
Thank you, Representative Nadeau. With that, the DE1 amendment is withdrawn. Representative Nadeau, I do have a 4A amendment here at the desk of yours. Would it be fair to say you're comfortable not offering that tonight as well?
That is correct. I withdraw the A4. I didn't withdraw the DE1, though. I just laid it over.
Fair enough. Motion withdrawn, but the amendment's still here, and we're still good to go. Thank you for that,
Great.
Representative Nadeau.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative O'Driscoll. Thank you, members, for this. With that, the bill is laid over. I'm happy to have any final commentary, Senator Kupec or Representative Wolgamott. By my clock, you have 7 days. Clock's ticking. Best of luck to you. To the members of the public who have an interest in this, it has been many months that this topic's been out there, but the moment is kind of here to see if you can find peace in the valley. With that, Senate 1986 is laid on the table. And ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our business tonight. We are adjourned.